The kiss wasn't love. It was a death sentence. When Adrian Calder, the most dangerous man in Chicago, claimed Maris Carter's lips in front of a crowded bar, he painted a target on her back that would change everything. One moment she was invisible, pouring drinks and dodging student loans. The next, armed men were dragging her into alleys while rival crime bosses circled like sharks. Now this psychology student must decide, run and die scared, or stand beside a killer and learn to fight back. Some protections come with a price. Some survival requires becoming something you never imagined. If you want to see how far Maris goes to survive, stick with me until the end and hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Tuesday night crowd at Henley's bar moved like a living organism, pulsing, breathing, demanding. Maris Carter worked the length of polished mahogany with practiced efficiency, her hands steady as she poured whiskey neat, cracked fresh beers, and smiled at the regulars who treated her like furniture that occasionally spoke. 23 years old, perpetually exhausted, and $3,000 short on next semester's tuition, she'd perfected the art of being present without being seen. Most nights, she preferred it that way. But for 3 months, someone had been watching. He sat at the far end of the bar where the overhead lights didn't quite reach, occupying the same stool every Tuesday and Friday like clockwork. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing tailored suits that probably cost more than her annual income, he never ordered more than 2 fingers of scotch and never touched his phone. He just watched her with eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Adrian Calder. She'd finally learned his name from Marcus, the day shift bartender who'd gone pale when she'd described him. "Stay away from that one," Marcus had warned, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He's not someone you want noticing you." Too late for that. Maris felt his gaze like a physical weight as she moved through her shift, laughing at bad jokes, deflecting unwanted advances, and pretending her feet didn't hurt. The psychology textbook stuffed in her backpack called it negative attention bias, the brain's tendency to focus on threats. But this wasn't bias. This was survival instinct screaming that the apex predator in the room had marked her as prey. "Another round when you get a chance, gorgeous." Derek Timmons grinned at her from 3 stools down, his insurance salesman's smile too wide, too familiar. He'd been coming in for 2 weeks, each visit pushing a little further into her personal space, testing boundaries she'd established with cold politeness. "Sure thing," Maris replied, her professional mask firmly in place as she reached for a fresh glass. "You know, you'd look even prettier if you smiled more." Derek leaned forward, his breath carrying the sweet rot of too many craft IPAs. "I'm serious. You've got that whole mysterious thing going, but guys like a girl who's friendly." Maris's jaw tightened, but she kept pouring. "I'll keep that in mind." "I mean it." His hand shot out, fingers circling her wrist before she could pull back. "You should smile at me. I tip well when the service is good." The grip wasn't painful, but it was controlling, a power play disguised as flirtation. Maris had experienced versions of this dance 100 times, each performance requiring her to balance firmness with friendliness, to reject without offending, to maintain the careful equilibrium that kept her tips flowing and her shifts tolerable. She was opening her mouth to deliver a practiced deflection when movement flickered in her peripheral vision. Adrian Calder was standing. He moved with the fluid grace of something dangerous, crossing the distance between them in 4 silent strides. The crowd seemed to sense him coming, bodies shifting unconsciously to clear his path like water partying around a blade. "Let go of her." The words came soft, almost conversational, but they carried an authority that made Derek's fingers spring open like he'd touched a live wire. Maris stepped back, cradling her wrist against her chest as she looked up at the man who'd been haunting her peripheral vision for 3 months. Up close, Adrian Calder was even more intimidating. 6'3" at least, with features that could have been carved from granite, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that suggested he'd never smiled in his life, and those eyes. Dark, calculating, and currently fixed on Derek with the interest of a scientist examining an insect. I wasn't," Derek stammered, his insurance salesman bravado evaporating. "We were just talking, man. No harm done." "Leave." Adrian didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The single word carried enough weight to send Derek scrambling for his wallet, throwing cash on the bar and disappearing into the crowd with the desperate energy of a rabbit fleeing a wolf. Maris watched him go, then turned to find Adrian's attention settling on her like a searchlight. "Thank you," she said carefully, trying to ignore the way her pulse hammered. "But I had it handled." "Did you?" The question came mild, almost curious, but Maris heard the challenge underneath. She straightened, meeting those dark eyes directly despite every instinct screaming at her to look away. "I've been handling drunk men since I was 21. I don't need rescuing." Something flickered across Adrian's face. Amusement, maybe, or approval. It vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. "You were going to tell him to back off politely," Adrian said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Worried about losing his tips, about making a scene. You would have set a boundary, and he would have pushed it again next week. And the week after that, until someone like me stepped in, or something worse happened." Maris's breath caught. The accuracy of his read made her skin prickle. "You don't know that. I know men like him. And I know women like you, smart enough to survive, proud enough to pretend you don't need help." Adrian leaned forward slightly, his presence overwhelming. "But here's what you don't know. That man watches you, waits for you to leave your shifts, follows you 3 blocks before turning toward his car." Ice flooded Maris's veins. "What?" "Every Tuesday for 2 weeks. Adrian's expression remained neutral, but something cold moved behind his eyes. "He's building up courage, planning. You have maybe 1 more week before he escalates." The professional mask Maris had worn for hours cracked, genuine fear bleeding through. "How do you... why would you..." "Because I watch you too." The admission hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Maris's hands gripped the edge of the bar, her mind racing through implications she didn't want to examine. This man had been watching her for months, knew her schedule, had apparently been monitoring another customer's stalking behavior without ever saying a word. She should be terrified. She was terrified. But underneath the fear lived something else, a frustrated anger at how unsurprising this revelation was, at how many times she'd felt eyes on her back during the walk home, at the exhaustion of being constantly vigilant and never quite safe. "What do you want from me?" Maris asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Adrian's expression shifted, something almost like respect crossing his features. "Nothing you're imagining. I don't hurt women, and I don't take what isn't freely given." He pulled a business card from his jacket, placing it on the bar between them. "But you should know, Derek Timmons won't be a problem anymore. He'll find a new bar, a new city, if he's smart." Maris stared at the card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, just a name and a phone number. "I don't understand." "You will." Adrian stepped back, creating distance between them. "Be careful, Maris Carter. Chicago isn't as safe as you think." He turned to leave, and Maris found herself speaking before her brain could catch up. "Wait." Adrian paused, looking back over his shoulder. "Why?" The question came raw, stripped of pretense. "Why watch me? Why help me? What am I to you?" For a long moment, Adrian said nothing. The bar noise continued around them. Laughter, clinking glasses, the bass pulse of music. But between them existed a pocket of silence, heavy with unspoken things. "You smile at everyone," Adrian finally said, his voice carrying something that might have been loneliness. "Everyone but me." Then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd with the same silent grace he'd arrived with, leaving Maris alone with racing thoughts, and a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Chambas. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Maris moved mechanically, mixing drinks and making change while her mind circled the same questions on an endless loop. Who was Adrian Calder? What did he really want? And why did Marcus turn pale just hearing his name? "You okay, Mars?" Jenny, the floor manager, touched her shoulder during the final cleanup. "You've been weird since that guy talked to you." Maris forced a smile. "Just tired, long week." "Tell me about it." Jenny counted out of the register, her movements efficient from 15 years of practice. "Hey, that guy who was bothering you earlier, Derek? He called the bar about an hour ago, said he won't be coming back, apologized for any discomfort he may have caused. Weird, right?" "Not weird. Terrifying." Maris finished wiping down the bar top, her hands moving on autopilot. Derek had called within an hour, which meant Adrian Calder had contacted him immediately after leaving, which meant Adrian had Derek's information, his number, enough leverage to make him apologize and disappear. What kind of man could do that with a single phone call? The kind Marcus told you to stay away from, her rational brain supplied. She collected her tips, $347, enough to buy groceries and maybe one textbook, and stuffed them in her backpack alongside the psychology materials she'd meant to study during her break. Adrian's business card went in her pocket, the heavy stock a constant presence against her hip. "Want me to walk you out?" Jenny offered, pulling on her coat. "It's past 2. I'm parked right out front. I'll be fine." It was a lie. Maris took the bus, but she'd perfected the art of casual deception, of making her life seem more secure than it was. If people knew she walked 4 blocks to the night bus stop, they'd worry, they'd offer help. And help came with obligations she couldn't afford. Jenny left first, calling goodnight over her shoulder. Maris waited 5 minutes, standard procedure to avoid looking like she needed an escort, then shouldered her backpack and stepped into the November cold. Chicago at 2:17 a.m. was a different city. The Loop's daytime energy had drained away, replaced by the hard edges and sharp corners that came out after dark. Maris pulled her jacket tighter, her breath fogging in the air as she started the walk she'd made hundreds of times. 4 blocks to the bus stop, 10-minute wait, 30-minute ride, half-mile walk to her apartment building. She'd timed it so many times she could do it in her sleep, but tonight felt different. Maris's psychology training had taught her about hypervigilance, the heightened state of threat awareness that followed trauma. But this wasn't paranoia. This was every instinct she possessed screaming that something had changed, that invisible lines had been crossed, that the fragile safety she'd built was crumbling. Adrian's words echoed, "Chicago isn't as safe as you think." She made it 2 blocks before she noticed the footsteps. They matched her pace, not overtaking, not falling behind. Professional. Deliberate. Maris's heart kicked into a higher gear. She pulled out her phone, pretending to check messages while using the black screen as a mirror. 2 figures. Male. Moving with coordinated precision, 20 feet back. Maris's fingers trembled as she opened her contacts. Who would she call? The police? And tell them what? That she felt nervous? Campus security? She wasn't on campus. Jenny was already home. Her roommate Sarah was in Milwaukee visiting family. She was alone. The next block housed a late-night bodega, its fluorescent light spilling onto the sidewalk like a beacon. Maris angled toward it, walking faster, praying that witnesses would deter whatever was coming. She made it 10 feet from the door when they moved. Strong hands grabbed her from behind, one clamping over her mouth, cutting off her scream. Maris fought on pure instinct, elbowing, kicking, trying to remember the self-defense moves from a seminar she'd taken sophomore year. But her attackers were professionals, overwhelming her resistance with practiced efficiency. They dragged her sideways into the alley between buildings, away from the street, away from help. Maris bit down hard on the hand covering her mouth, tasting blood, hearing a curse. The grip loosened for a second, enough time to scream. "Help!" Something pressed against her ribs. Not quite painful, but unmistakably a weapon. "Quiet," a voice hissed in her ear. "We're just delivering a message." Terror flooded Maris's system, her psychology training dissolving into pure animal panic. This was how women disappeared, how bodies ended up in dumpsters, how statistics became real. Then the alley exploded with movement. Dark figures materialized from nowhere, 4 of them, maybe 5, moving with military precision. Maris heard the wet thud of impact, a choked cry, the clatter of something metal hitting pavement. Her captors released her, spinning to face this new threat. Maris stumbled backward, her shoulder slamming into brick. Through the chaos of bodies, she caught glimpses, professional fighting, brutal efficiency, her attackers going down one by one with barely a sound. 30 seconds, maybe less, and it was over. 2 men lay groaning on the ground. 3 others stood over them, dressed in dark suits, their faces expressionless. One of them spoke into a phone, his voice low and professional. "Package is secure. Requesting extraction to the primary location." Package. They meant her. Maris's legs decided to stop working. She slid down the wall, her backpack hitting the ground beside her, her entire body shaking with adrenaline crash. One of the suited men approached, his hands visible and empty, a gesture of peace she didn't believe for a second. "Miss Carter, my name is Marcus Reed. I work security for Mr. Calder." He crouched to her eye level, his voice steady and professional. "You're safe now, but we need to move you to a secure location. Those men were sent to kidnap you." Maris's laugh came out broken, hysterical. "Kidnap me? Why? I'm nobody. I pour drinks. I'm drowning in student debt. You were seen with Adrian Calder." Marcus's expression held something like sympathy. "That makes you valuable to his enemies." The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. Maris had been seen with lots of people, hundreds of customers, fellow students, random strangers on the bus. Why would one conversation make her a target? Unless Adrian Calder wasn't just some wealthy regular. Unless Marcus's warning, "Stay away from that one," had meant something far more dangerous than she'd imagined. "I don't understand," Maris whispered, but she did. Pieces were clicking together. The expensive suits, the ability to make Derek disappear with one phone call. The way crowds parted for him. The security team that had appeared from nowhere. Marcus stood, offering his hand. "Mr. Calder will explain, but we need to leave, now, before the authorities arrive and complicate things." Maris stared at his hand like it might burn her. Every rational thought screamed at her to refuse, to demand police, to run. But the men groaning on the ground told their own story. She'd been grabbed by professionals. If Marcus's team hadn't intervened, she'd be in a van right now, heading somewhere she'd never return from. She took his hand. The SUV waiting at the alley's entrance was black, expensive, and completely illegal, parked in a loading zone with the engine running. Marcus guided her to the back seat with gentle but firm pressure, his body language making it clear refusal wasn't really an option. Maris climbed in, her backpack clutched to her chest like a shield. Another security guard sat in the driver's seat, his eyes scanning the street with professional paranoia. Marcus slid in beside her, and the vehicle was moving before her door fully closed. "Where are you taking me?" Maris asked, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Somewhere safe." "That's not an answer." Marcus glanced at her, something like approval in his expression. "Mr. Calder's primary residence, top floor of the Apex building. 24-hour security, controlled access, no windows that can be breached from outside." Maris knew the Apex building. Everyone in Chicago did. 73 stories of steel and glass, luxury condos starting at $3 million. The kind of place she'd never enter except maybe to clean rooms. "I want to go home," she said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "Your home isn't secure. We posted guards, but it's a walk-up apartment with multiple entry points and neighbors who don't ask questions. If they know where you work, they know where you live." They. The people who tried to kidnap her, the enemies Marcus had mentioned. Maris felt reality tilting, the safe world she'd built revealing itself as tissue paper, ready to tear. "My roommate, Sarah Chen, 22, mechanical engineering major at Northwestern, currently visiting family in Milwaukee. She's been notified that you're safe and will be staying with friends for a few days. Your shift manager has been informed you won't be in this week due to a family emergency." Maris stared at him. "How do you—" "We've been monitoring your life for 3 months, Miss Carter, since Mr. Calder first noticed you." Marcus's tone held no apology. "It's what we do. Identify threats, assess vulnerabilities, establish protective protocols." "I didn't ask for protection." "No." Marcus met her eyes directly. "But you needed it, anyway." The SUV glided through empty streets, heading north toward the high-rises that marked Chicago's wealthiest districts. Maris watched the city slide past, each block taking her further from anything familiar. Her phone buzzed. Sarah, sending worried texts. Maris's fingers hovered over the screen, trying to formulate a response that wouldn't sound insane. "Hey, something crazy happened. I'm fine staying with a friend. We'll explain later." 3 dots appeared immediately. "What friend? What happened? Are you okay?" Maris looked at Marcus. "Can I tell her the truth?" "Which truth? That you were almost kidnapped? That you're under protection from a man whose business dealings aren't entirely legal? That your life changed completely tonight and there's no going back?" Marcus's voice stayed gentle, but his words cut deep. "Tell her you're safe. Anything else puts her at risk too. Maris typed slowly. I'm safe. Trust me. I'll call soon. She wasn't safe. She was being driven to a strange man's penthouse by armed guards after surviving an attempted kidnapping. But what other option existed? Go home and wait for the next attack? Call the police and try to explain that a mysterious crime boss had somehow made her a target? The Apex building rose before them like a monument to wealth, its glass facade reflecting the city lights. The SUV descended into an underground garage, past multiple security checkpoints, each guard nodding recognition at Marcus. They parked in a private section marked with a single letter, A for Adrian. Maris stepped out on shaking legs, her psychology training kicking in with observations she couldn't stop making. The garage was pristine, no oil stains, no random debris. Cameras covered every angle. The elevator waiting for them required a keycard and fingerprint scan. This wasn't just security. This was a fortress. The elevator rose in silence, no floor numbers displayed. Maris counted seconds, estimating height. 73 stories meant roughly 900 feet. At typical elevator speed, the doors opened directly into an apartment. No hallway, no neighbors, just straight into a space that defied every expectation Maris had built. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, Chicago spread out like a glittering circuit board. Modern furniture in blacks and grays, clean lines, no clutter. Art on the walls, original pieces probably worth more than her college education. And standing by the windows, silhouetted against the city lights, was Adrian Calder. He turned as they entered, his expression unreadable. He'd removed his jacket, rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle. The civilized veneer of the bar was gone, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. Leave us, Adrian said to Marcus. Sir, protocol. I said leave. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. He touched Maris's shoulder briefly, a gesture of reassurance or warning, she couldn't tell, and retreated to the elevator. The doors closed with a soft chime, leaving her alone with the man who'd somehow become the center of her collapsing world. Adrian moved to a side table, pouring amber liquid into 2 glasses. You're angry. It wasn't a question, but Maris answered anyway. Angry? I was almost kidnapped, dragged to your apartment, had my entire life investigated without permission. And apparently I'm now a target because you decided to talk to me in a bar. Her voice rose with each sentence. So, yes, I'm a little bit angry. Good. Adrian crossed the room, offering her one of the glasses. Anger means you're thinking clearly. Fear makes people stupid. Maris took the glass but didn't drink. Who are you? You know who I am. Marcus already told you. He told me your name. That's not the same thing. Maris met his gaze, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed. What do you do that makes people want to kidnap anyone seen with you? What kind of business requires this level of security? And why the hell have you been watching me for 3 months? Adrian sipped his whiskey, studying her over the rim like she was a puzzle he was still figuring out. I manage interests that exist in the gray areas between legal and illegal. Import, export, information brokering, security consulting. I provide services that powerful people need but can't obtain through legitimate channels. You're a criminal. I'm a businessman who operates outside traditional frameworks. Adrian's tone didn't change. The distinction matters. Not to me, it doesn't. Maris set down her untouched drink. I want to go home. You can't, not safely, not yet. You don't get to decide that. Actually, I do. Adrian moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the enclosed space. Because the moment I spoke to you in that bar, the moment I touched you, my enemies started making plans. They've been watching me for months, looking for leverage, searching for weakness. You smiled at that idiot customer, and I reacted. I made you visible. Maris's breath caught. You made me a target. Yes. The admission came flat, without apology. Maris felt her anger crystallize into something colder, harder. Then fix it. Tell them I'm nobody. Make me invisible again. It doesn't work that way. Adrian set down his own glass with careful precision. In my world, once you're noticed, you stay noticed. The only question is whether you're protected or exposed. So I'm just supposed to what? Live here? Under your guard? Give up my life because you couldn't keep your hands to yourself? Something flashed across Adrian's face. Regret? Maybe. or frustration. I can offer you protection, resources, anything you need to finish your education and build the life you want. But you have to stay close. Let my people keep you safe. Let me keep you safe. Why? The question burst out of Maris, raw and desperate. Why do you care? You don't know me. We've never even had a real conversation. What am I to you? Adrian went very still. When he spoke, his voice carried something Maris hadn't heard before. Vulnerability, carefully controlled but present. 3 months ago, I came to Henley's because my informant worked there. I sat at that bar planning to meet him, conduct business, leave. Then I watched you smile at a customer who'd spilled his drink. He was embarrassed, apologizing too much, clearly having a bad day. You could have been annoyed. Instead, you laughed, told him a story about the time you dumped an entire tray of drinks on yourself during training, made him feel better about his mistake. Adrian paused, his jaw working like the words cost him something. You saw him, really saw him, not as a customer or a tip or an obstacle, but as a person worth kindness. I've spent 20 years in a world where everyone wants something, where every smile is calculated, every gesture strategic. And there you were, being genuinely kind for absolutely no reason. Maris felt her anger wavering, complicated by understanding she didn't want. That's just being a decent human being. In your world, maybe. In mine, kindness is weakness. Attention is currency. You give both freely to people who'll never appreciate it, and you don't even realize how rare that is. Adrian's dark eyes held hers. I kept coming back because watching you was like remembering what it felt like to be human, before everything became strategy and survival. The confession hung between them, heavy with implications Maris wasn't ready to examine. Part of her wanted to rage at him for the romanticized stalker behavior, but her psychology training recognized something else. Profound loneliness, the kind that came from living behind walls so high you forgot what connection felt like. That doesn't give you the right to make decisions for me, Maris said quietly. I'm not some kindness dispenser for your emotional rehabilitation. I'm a person with my own life, my own choices. I know. Adrian stepped back, creating distance, which is why I'm giving you one. Stay here, protected and resourced, until we eliminate the threat. Or leave, knowing my enemies will use you to hurt me and won't care if you survive the process. I won't stop you, but I also won't be able to protect you if you choose to go. Maris laughed bitterly. Some choice. Stay prisoner or die. You won't be a prisoner. Continue your studies remotely. I have resources, tutors, equipment, access to any research materials you need. Finish your degree here, safer and better equipped than you'd ever be in that overcrowded lecture hall. What about my job? My bills? Your rent and tuition are handled. Your student loans are paid in full as of 20 minutes ago. You'll receive a monthly stipend equivalent to your bartending income plus tips. Adrian pulled out his phone, showing her a bank statement. Consider it compensation for the inconvenience I've caused. Maris stared at the numbers on the screen, her mind struggling to process. $150,000 in an account with her name. Her entire debt? Gone. 6 months of income, guaranteed. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like a cage lined with gold. I don't want your money, she whispered. It's not charity, it's responsibility. Adrian pocketed his phone. I made you a target. The least I can do is ensure you survive the consequences. Maris walked to the window, looking out over the city that had somehow become foreign territory. Somewhere down there was her apartment, her normal life, her carefully constructed independence. Could she really just walk away? Trust that Adrian's enemies wouldn't grab her the moment she left this building? Her psychology training supplied the answer. No. These weren't impulsive criminals. They'd planned the kidnapping, coordinated the attack, would absolutely try again. She had 2 choices, accept protection or accept death. How long? She asked, her breath fogging the glass. Until we identify who ordered the attack and remove them as a threat. Could be weeks. Could be months. And if I do this, if I stay, what do you expect from me? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. The truth? I don't know. I've never done this before. Never brought someone into my world who didn't already belong there. I just know that letting you walk away unprotected would be the worst decision I've ever made. Maris turned to face him. I have conditions. Name them. I continue my education. No interruptions, no interference. If I need to access campus or meet with professors, your security facilitates it. They don't prevent it. Adrian nodded. Agreed. I want complete honesty. No more surveillance I don't know about. No more decisions made without consulting me. If something concerns me, I have the right to know. Within reason. Some information could put you at greater risk. Then you explain why I can't know, and I decide if I accept that answer. I'm not a child to be protected from uncomfortable truths. Maris crossed her arms. Take it or leave it. Adrian's expression shifted. Respect, clear and undisguised. Agreed. What else? This ends the moment the threat is gone. You help me establish a new apartment, new routine, whatever I need to safely rebuild my independence. And then you let me go. No strings, no continued surveillance, no showing up at whatever bar I work at next. The last condition clearly cost Adrian something. Maris watched him struggle with it, his jaw tightening, hands flexing into fists before relaxing again. Agreed, he finally said, though I reserve the right to ensure your new situation is genuinely secure. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best deal Maris was going to get, and they both knew it. One more thing, she added, I want to understand your world. If I'm going to be part of it temporarily, I need to know the rules, the players, how to protect myself. Teach me. Or have Marcus teach me. But I refuse to be helpless. Adrian studied her for a long moment, something like admiration crossing his features. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Tears? Begging? Maybe an attempt to seduce me for better terms. He smiled, barely, just the corner of his mouth quirking. You bargain like you've done this before. I've been negotiating with drunk men for tips since I was 21. This isn't that different. Maris felt exhaustion hitting her in waves. I need sleep. Where am I staying? Guest suite. Second door on the left. Fully stocked bathroom, clothes in your size in the closet. Of course he had clothes in her size. 3 months of surveillance probably included her measurements. Maris grabbed her backpack, heading toward the indicated door. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the man who'd upended her entire existence in a single night. Adrian? Yes? That kiss in the bar, the one that started all this, was that calculated? Part of some bigger plan? He met her eyes directly. No. That was the first impulsive thing I've done in 15 years. Which should tell you how dangerous you are to me. Maris didn't know how to respond to that, so she didn't. She walked into the guest suite and closed the door, leaning against it until her legs stopped shaking. The room was beautiful. King bed, modern furniture, that same spectacular view. The bathroom held luxury toiletries and thick towels. The closet contained jeans, shirts, sweaters, all her size, all her style. Adrian's people had been thorough. Maris caught her reflection in the mirror, smudged makeup, tangled hair, eyes too wide. She looked like someone who'd survived an attack. Someone whose life had fractured. She pulled out her phone, pulling up the news. Nothing about an attempted kidnapping. Nothing about violence in the alley behind her bar. Adrian's people had cleaned it up completely, like it never happened. But it had happened. She had the adrenaline crash and shaking hands to prove it. Maris showered, washing away the memory of strange hands grabbing her, the terror of the alley. She put on the provided pajamas, soft cotton, exactly her preferred style, and climbed into a bed that probably cost more than her car. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion dragged her under, her last conscious thought a question she couldn't answer. What have I gotten myself into? Maris woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the disorienting sensation of not knowing where she was. The mattress beneath her felt too soft, the ceiling too high, the silence too complete. Then memory crashed back. The kidnapping attempt. The armed guards. Adrian Calder's penthouse fortress, 73 stories above the city she thought she knew. She sat up slowly, her body aching from yesterday's adrenaline crash. The bedside clock read 9:47 a.m. She'd slept nearly 8 hours, which seemed impossible given the circumstances. But exhaustion didn't care about trauma. It took what it needed. A soft knock interrupted her inventory of soreness. Miss Carter? Marcus's voice came through the door, professional and calm. I have breakfast and your course materials. May I enter? Maris looked down at herself. Rumpled pajamas, no bra, hair definitely resembling a bird's nest. "Give me 5 minutes." She found her jeans and a sweater in the closet, everything fitting perfectly in a way that still unnerved her. 3 months of surveillance. They knew her size, her style, probably her favorite breakfast cereal. The violation should have angered her more, but she was running low on emotional bandwidth. Marcus entered when she called, carrying a tray and a leather messenger bag. He set both on the small table by the window with the careful precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Coffee, black, 2 sugars, scrambled eggs, wheat toast, fruit. He gestured to the tray. "Your laptop and textbooks are in the bag, along with a new phone. The old one's security was compromised." Maris stared at the food, her stomach warring with her pride. "How do you know how I take my coffee?" "We know everything, Miss Carter. It's our job." Marcus's expression held no apology. "Mr. Calder wanted me to brief you on the situation. Are you ready?" She wasn't. But ready didn't matter anymore. "Go ahead." Marcus pulled out a tablet, swiping through images as he spoke. "The men who attacked you work for Victor Molina, who runs protection rackets and trafficking operations on the south side. He's been trying to expand into territory Mr. Calder controls. The kidnapping was strategic: grab you, use you as leverage to force concessions." The clinical way he described her potential kidnapping made Maris's skin crawl. "What kind of leverage?" "Trade routes, mostly. Mr. Calder controls access to several shipping channels Molina wants. With you as a hostage, he could have demanded access or better terms." Marcus swiped again, showing her a photograph of a heavy-set man with cold eyes. "This is Molina, former enforcer who got ambitious. Dangerous, but not particularly intelligent." Maris forced herself to look at the man who'd ordered her grabbed. He looked ordinary, the kind of person you'd pass on the street without a second glance, which somehow made it worse. What happens now? "Mr. Calder is making it known that you're under his direct protection. Anyone who touches you faces immediate retaliation. It's a deterrent, but not a guarantee. Molina might decide you're worth the risk. So I'm bait. You're leverage that Mr. Calder refuses to let anyone else use." Marcus met her eyes. "There's a difference." Maris doubted that, but arguing seemed pointless. She picked at her eggs, forcing food past the anxiety constricting her throat. "What about my classes? I have a cognitive psychology exam on Friday and a paper due next week. Your professors have been contacted. You're taking a medical leave due to stress and anxiety, which isn't technically a lie. You'll complete coursework remotely. I'll facilitate any necessary meetings with academic advisors. Everything handled, every detail managed." Maris should have felt grateful, but instead she felt erased. Her life reorganized without her input, her choices made by strangers who knew her measurements but not her mind. "I want to talk to Sarah," she said. "My roommate. She's going to be worried." Marcus nodded. "We can arrange a video call, but you can't tell her where you are or why. Say you're staying with family dealing with a personal emergency. Keep it vague." Maris set down her fork with more force than necessary. "I'm tired of lying." "Then you're in the wrong situation." Marcus's tone softened slightly. "I understand this is difficult, but the people trying to hurt you don't care about your comfort or your ethics. They care about profit and power. The lies keep you alive." The words settled like stones in Maris's stomach. She'd spent 23 years believing the world operated on certain principles. Work hard, be kind, follow the rules, and you'd be safe. But Adrian's world functioned on entirely different physics, where kindness was weakness and rules were suggestions for people without enough power to break them. "When can I meet with Adrian?" she asked. "We need to discuss expectations." "He's in meetings until 3. I'll arrange time then." Marcus stood, collecting the tray. "In the meantime, I suggest you review your course materials. Maintaining your routine will help with the psychological adjustment." Psychological adjustment, like she was a plant being repotted, needing time to adapt to new soil. Maris spent the morning trying to focus on cognitive psychology, but her mind kept drifting. The penthouse felt simultaneously like a luxury hotel and a very expensive cage. She could see the entire city from these windows, but couldn't safely walk a single block of it. The irony wasn't lost on her. Around noon, Marcus returned with lunch and the promised phone. "Your roommate is available for a call whenever you're ready. The phone is secure, no location data, encrypted connection, but keep the conversation brief and vague." Maris took the device. her hands shaking slightly as she dialed Sarah's number. Her roommate answered on the first ring. Maris! Oh my God, I've been freaking out. What's going on? Are you okay? Sarah's familiar voice nearly broke Maris's composure. She swallowed hard, forcing steadiness. I'm fine. Something happened with my family. I can't really explain right now, but I needed to leave town quickly. What family? Your parents are dead and you don't have siblings. Sarah's psychology major made her dangerously perceptive. Mars, what's really happening? Maris looked at Marcus, who shook his head slightly. It's complicated, I'm safe, I promise. I just need some time to handle things. You're lying. Sarah's voice went flat. You use that tone when you're lying. Is someone making you say this? Are you in trouble? Maris closed her eyes, hating every word. Sarah, please, just trust me. I'll explain everything when I can, but right now I need you to believe I'm okay. A long silence, then quieter. How long will you be gone? I don't know, a few weeks, maybe longer. And I'm just supposed to accept that my best friend disappeared overnight and won't tell me why? Yes. Maris's voice cracked. I'm sorry. I know it's not fair, but please, just give me time. Another pause, filled with everything Sarah wasn't saying. Finally, okay, but Mars? When you're ready to talk, I'm here, no matter what kind of trouble you're in. The call ended before Maris could respond. She set down the phone, blinking back tears she refused to shed in front of Marcus. That was harder than the kidnapping attempt, she said. Marcus's expression held unexpected sympathy. Lying to people we care about usually is, but you protected her by keeping her in the dark. Did I, or did I just make her more worried? Both. Welcome to Mr. Calder's world, where every choice comes with costs. The afternoon dragged. Maris tried to study, managed maybe 20 pages before her concentration shattered again. She did push-ups, paced, stared out the windows at the city she couldn't access. By the time Marcus knocked at 2:30, she was ready to climb the walls. Mr. Calder, we'll see you now. Maris followed him through the penthouse to a room she hadn't noticed before, a study lined with bookshelves dominated by a massive desk. Adrian sat behind it, reading something on a tablet, his jacket discarded and sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, faint shadows under his eyes, suggesting he'd slept even less than she had. Leave us, Adrian said to Marcus, not looking up. The door closed with a soft click. Maris remained standing, refusing to take the chair positioned in front of the desk, like a supplicant before a throne. You wanted to talk, Adrian said, finally meeting her gaze. Talk. I want ground rules. Clear boundaries for this arrangement. Adrian set down the tablet, giving her his full attention, such as, my education comes first, always. If you need me to skip a virtual lecture or miss an assignment deadline, the answer is no. Agreed. I want access to information about the situation, daily briefings from Marcus or you about any developments, any threats, anything that affects my safety. Within operational security limits, yes. I want physical autonomy. I'll accept security escorts, but I won't be confined to this apartment. If I need to go somewhere, campus, a library, wherever, we figure out how to make it safe, not impossible. Adrian's jaw tightened. That depends entirely on the threat level. No, it depends on whether you trust your security team to do their job. Maris leaned forward, hands on his desk. I won't live in a cage, Adrian. I'd rather take my chances outside than slowly suffocate in here. For a long moment, they stared at each other, wills clashing in the space between them. Finally, Adrian exhaled. Conditional agreement. You submit itineraries in advance, follow security protocols without argument, and accept that some days the answer will be no, regardless of your preferences. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Fine. One more thing. I want to be useful. That got his attention. Useful how? You said my ability to read people was rare, that I noticed things. So let me notice things for you. Teach me what to look for in your meetings, your negotiations. I'll sit quietly, observe, and report what I see. Maris straightened. I refuse to be decorative. If I'm stuck in your world, I'm going to be functional in it. Adrian stood, moving around the desk with that predatory grace. You understand what you're offering, to be complicit in business dealings that operate outside the law? I understand I'm already complicit by being here. I'm choosing to turn that liability into an asset. Something flickered in Adrian's expression. Surprise, maybe, or reassessment. He studied her like she was a puzzle that kept revealing new pieces. Tomorrow night, I have dinner with a potential business partner. High stakes, delicate negotiations. You'll accompany me. Maris's heart kicked. What kind of business? The kind where reading the room correctly could mean the difference between profit and bloodshed. Adrian circled her slowly, his presence overwhelming. You'll wear what my people provide. Say nothing unless spoken to directly, and watch. Afterward, you'll tell me everything you noticed about body language, tone, micro-expressions. Can you do that? Every instinct screamed that this was a terrible idea, but staying locked in this penthouse, slowly going mad, was worse. Yes. Then we have an agreement. Adrian extended his hand. Maris took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the controlled strength in his grip. This was a mistake. She knew it with absolute certainty, but mistakes were sometimes the only path forward when all the safe routes had collapsed. The next 24 hours passed in preparation that felt like training for war. A woman named Isabella arrived with dresses, each more expensive than Maris's monthly rent used to be. She selected a midnight blue sheath that looked elegant without being provocative, paired with heels that added 3 inches to Maris's height. You represent Mr. Calder now, Isabella explained, pinning Maris's hair into a sophisticated twist. That means projecting power, not availability. You're untouchable. Remember that. Marcus provided a different kind of education. He showed her photographs of the dinner guests, explaining relationships and histories. Thomas Garrett, the potential partner, ran a legitimate shipping business with illegitimate side operations. His lawyer, Patricia Chen, was brilliant and ruthless. His bodyguard, a man named Dimitri, had killed at least 4 people that Marcus knew about. Watch Garrett's hands, Marcus instructed. When he's lying, he touches his watch. Chen fidgets with her pen when she's uncertain, and if Dimitri moves toward his jacket, hit the floor immediately. Maris absorbed it all, her psychology training finally finding practical application in this twisted classroom. She'd spent years learning to read people in therapy contexts. Now she was weaponizing that skill for criminal negotiations. The moral implication sat heavy in her chest, but she'd crossed the line by agreeing to stay. Might as well see where it led. The restaurant occupied the top floor of another luxury building, accessible only by private elevator. Adrian's hand rested on the small of Maris's back as they entered, a possessive gesture that made her stiffen until she understood its purpose. This was theater. She was playing the role of Adrian Calder's woman, and that role required visible intimacy. Thomas Garrett stood as they approached, his smile practiced and empty. Adrian, punctual as always. His gaze slid to Maris, assessing. And who's this? Maris Carter. Adrian pulled out her chair, his manners impeccable. She's staying with me while completing her graduate studies. The lie came smooth, elevating her from bartender to academic. Garrett's expression shifted, reassessing her value based on imagined credentials. Psychology, is it? Garrett settled into his seat. Fascinating field. Must give you interesting insights into human behavior. It has its moments, Maris replied carefully, channeling every bit of poise she possessed. Patricia Chen arrived moments later, all business in a gray suit, her handshake firm and brief. Dimitri took a position by the wall, his bulk blocking the nearest exit. The arrangement wasn't accidental. Garrett had positioned his muscle between them, an escape. A subtle power move. Dinner began with small talk that felt like reconnaissance. Garrett asked about Adrian's recent acquisitions, probing for information while sharing carefully curated details about his own operations. Patricia interjected occasionally, her legal mind parsing every word for liability. Maris ate slowly, watching everything. Garrett did touch his watch when discussing container capacities, lying about available space, probably. Chen's pen clicking increased when Garrett mentioned expansion timelines. She didn't trust his projections. And Dimitri's attention kept drifting to the kitchen entrance, like he expected someone. A backup plan. Garrett had people in place. The realization sent ice through Maris's veins. This wasn't just a business dinner, it was a setup. She caught Adrian's eye, holding his gaze for 3 seconds. The signal Marcus had taught her for situation developing. Adrian's expression didn't change, but his next words carried an edge. Thomas, Let's stop dancing around the actual negotiation. You want access to my Pacific routes. I want assurance you won't undercut my pricing. What are you really offering? Garrett's smile widened. Direct. I appreciate that. He leaned forward and his hand moved toward his watch. I'm offering 40-60 split. My operations handling distribution while you maintain route control. Lie. Maris knew it with absolute certainty. She glanced at Chen, whose pen had stopped moving entirely. The lawyer knew something was wrong too. That's generous, Adrian said carefully. Almost too generous. I believe in fair partnerships. Another watch touch. Especially with men I respect. Dmitri shifted position, his hand drifting toward his jacket. Maris's pulse hammered. She looked at the kitchen entrance. Two men emerging, their body language wrong, movements coordinated. Adrian, she said quietly, her voice barely audible. Kitchen. He reacted instantly, his hand finding hers under the table, squeezing once. Acknowledgement. Then louder. Thomas, I think we need to discuss this more privately. Patricia, would you excuse us? Actually, Garrett's genial mask slipped. I think we're fine right here. The kitchen men were closer now. Dimitri's hand had definitely moved inside his jacket. Marcus appeared from nowhere, positioning himself between Maris and the approaching threat. Mr. Garrett, Adrian's voice went cold. I'm going to give you one opportunity to call off whatever play you're running, because if this goes the direction I think it's going, you won't survive dessert. Garrett's face hardened. You're getting old, Adrian. Careful. Predictable. You think I didn't know about your little surveillance? I've been feeding you false intelligence for months. Maris's mind raced. If Garrett had compromised Adrian's information networks, then everything Marcus had told her could be wrong. Melina might not even be the real threat. This entire situation could be, you used the girl, Patricia Chen said suddenly, her voice sharp. You let Adrian see the kidnapping attempt to make him bring her somewhere public. You're using her as a distraction. Everyone froze. Chen stood, gathering her briefcase with jerky movements. I didn't agree to this, Thomas. Whatever you're planning, I'm out. Sit down, Patricia. Garrett's tone carried threat. I'm a lawyer, not a co-conspirator to whatever stupidity you're attempting. Chen looked at Adrian. I suggest you leave. Quickly. Dmitri moved then, pulling a weapon, but Marcus was faster. The two men collided in a blur of violence while Adrian grabbed Maris, pulling her toward the exit. The kitchen men surged forward, but more of Adrian's security materialized, creating a barrier. Go! Marcus shouted, grappling with Dmitri. Now! Adrian didn't hesitate. He moved Maris through the chaos with brutal efficiency, his body shielding hers as they hit the private elevator. The doors closed on the sounds of fighting, descending in tense silence. Are you hurt? Adrian's hands moved over her shoulders, her arms, checking for injuries with clinical precision. No, Maris couldn't finish. Adrenaline flooded her system, making her shake. What just happened? You saved us. That's what happened. Adrian pulled her against him, his embrace fierce. You saw the setup before anyone else. If we'd stayed another 30 seconds... He didn't finish, but Maris understood. Garrett had planned something. Kidnapping, assassination, she might never know. Her observation had given them the warning they needed to escape. The elevator opened into the parking garage. Adrian's SUV waited, engine running. They climbed in, Marcus appearing moments later, his knuckles bloody, but his expression satisfied. Dmitri won't be a problem anymore, Marcus reported as the vehicle accelerated into the night. Garrett's people scattered. Chen is already talking to the authorities. She'll flip on him to save herself. Good. Adrian's jaw was tight. I want surveillance on all of Garrett's operations. If he breathes wrong, I want to know about it. Maris sat in silence, processing. She'd just witnessed, participated in, something that would have seemed impossible 48 hours ago. Business negotiations that turned into violence. A lawyer choosing survival over loyalty. Adrian's world operating on rules she barely understood. You did well, Adrian said quietly, his hand finding hers in the darkness. Better than well. You read the situation perfectly. I was terrified. Smart people usually are. His fingers tightened around hers. Fear keeps you alert. It's the people without fear who make fatal mistakes. Back at the penthouse, Maris collapsed onto the sofa, her expensive dress rumpled, her careful hair falling loose. Adrian poured whiskey, pressing a glass into her hands. Drink. It helps with the adrenaline crash. This time she obeyed, the liquid burning down her throat. Is it always like that? No. Usually people are more subtle about their betrayals. Adrian sat beside her, close enough that she felt his warmth. Garrett was desperate. That makes people reckless. Chen said he'd been feeding you false intelligence. Does that mean? It means I need to audit my entire information network. Find out where the leaks are. Who else might be compromised? Adrian ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion showing through the cracks. It also means you're more valuable than I realized. Maris looked at him. Because I noticed things your own people missed? Because you noticed them without bias. My people see what they expect to see. You see what's actually there. Adrian met her gaze. That's a rare gift, Maris. In my world, it could save lives. The weight of that statement settled over her. You want me to keep doing this? Attending meetings, reading people, reporting back? I want you to choose. Adrian's tone held surprising gentleness. You proved tonight you have the instincts for this work. But instincts and willingness aren't the same thing. I won't force you into a role you don't want. Maris considered. The ethical part of her recoiled from the idea of becoming Adrian's human lie detector, using her psychological training to aid criminal enterprise. But the practical part recognized a troubling truth. She was good at it, and in this world she'd been dragged into, being good at something meant having power. If I do this, she said slowly, I need training, real training, not just watching photographs and memorizing names. I need to understand the business, the players, the actual stakes. Adrian studied her with that intensity that made her feel transparent. That means going deeper, learning things that make you complicit. There's no going back once you cross that line. I crossed the line when I agreed to stay here. Maris set down her glass. At least this way, I'm crossing it with purpose instead of just surviving. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Pride, maybe, or recognition. All right, starting tomorrow, Marcus trains you in operational security, threat assessment, intelligence analysis. I'll teach you the business side, who controls what, how deals are structured, where the real power lies. And in exchange, you help me rebuild my intelligence network from the ground up. Identify who I can trust, who's feeding me lies, who needs to be removed. Adrian's voice went hard. Garrett wasn't working alone. Someone bigger is making plays against me, and I need to know who before they succeed. Maris nodded, sealing an agreement that felt like stepping off a cliff. When do we start? Now. Adrian stood, offering his hand. Let me show you something. He led her to a section of the penthouse she hadn't explored, a locked room requiring both keycard and biometric scan. Inside, the walls were covered with screens displaying information feeds, surveillance footage, data streams she couldn't begin to parse. This is the nerve center, Adrian explained, gesturing to the overwhelming display. Every piece of intelligence my organization gathers flows through here. Shipment manifests, financial transactions, movement reports, communications intercepts. Maris stared at the screens, her mind struggling to process the sheer volume. How do you make sense of all this? Pattern recognition. Most of it is noise, legitimate business, routine operations. But buried in the noise are anomalies, payments that don't match patterns, routes that deviate from norms, people appearing where they shouldn't be. Adrian pulled up a specific feed highlighting certain transactions, like this. 3 shell companies made simultaneous payments to the same offshore account yesterday. Individually, unremarkable. Together, a pattern. Someone consolidating funds? Someone preparing for a major operation. Adrian's jaw tightened. Garrett's betrayal was probably funded through this account, which means whoever's behind it has resources to burn. Maris leaned closer, studying the data with her psychology training, instinctively cataloging patterns. The payment amounts vary, but the timing is too precise to be coincidental. Whoever's coordinating this wants it to look random, but can't quite achieve it. Because true randomness is nearly impossible for humans to generate, Adrian finished. We fall into patterns even when we're trying not to. They spent the next hour analyzing the data, Adrian explaining the business implications while Maris pointed out behavioral patterns she recognized. It felt like the strangest tutorial session of her life. Criminal intelligence analysis taught by a man who killed people for crossing him, received by a psychology student who'd been pouring drinks 2 days ago. But it also felt right. Like pieces of herself she hadn't known existed were finally clicking into place. "You're a natural at this," Adrian said as they finally shut down the displays. "Most people take weeks to start seeing the patterns. You found 3 anomalies in an hour." Maris felt a disturbing flush of pride. "My thesis was on behavioral prediction modeling. I've been training to spot patterns for years. Just didn't expect to apply it to criminal finance." "Nothing about you is what I expected." Adrian's voice held something warm, dangerous. "You should have crumbled, demanded to leave. Instead, you're standing here analyzing intelligence feeds like you've done it all your life. Maybe I'm just good at adapting. Or maybe you were always meant for this world and just didn't know it yet." The suggestion should have horrified her. Instead, Maris felt something uncomfortably close to recognition. How many times had she felt out of place in normal life? How often had her ability to read people, to see through lies, made her isolated rather than connected? Here, in Adrian's world, those skills weren't liabilities. They were survival tools. "I should sleep," she said, stepping back from the implications. "Tomorrow's training starts early?" 6 a.m. Marcus doesn't believe in gentle introductions. Maris headed toward her room, pausing at the doorway. "Adrian, thank you for trusting me with this." His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Thank you for staying when you could have run. Not many people choose this life voluntarily. I didn't choose it. You dragged me into it. You chose to make it yours instead of just enduring it. That's the same thing." Maris didn't have an answer for that, so she simply nodded and closed the door. She changed out of the expensive dress, hanging it carefully, already mentally preparing for whatever tomorrow would bring. Her phone buzzed, the new secure one. A message from Adrian. "Sleep well. Tomorrow we find out who's trying to kill me, and you're going to help me stop them." Maris stared at the message, her psychology training screaming that this was textbook Stockholm Syndrome, that she was identifying with her captor, that she should be planning escape instead of planning analysis. But her instincts, those same instincts that had saved them tonight, whispered something different. This wasn't capture. This was evolution. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, being overlooked, being the kind person everyone forgot about the moment she left the room. Adrian had made her visible, and now she was learning to turn that visibility into power. She fell asleep with data patterns still dancing behind her eyelids, her dreams full of numbers and faces, and the dark thrill of finally being good at something that mattered. Marcus arrived at precisely 6 a.m. with coffee and a tablet loaded with case files. Maris had been awake for an hour, her mind still processing the previous night's revelations, her body humming with nervous energy that felt suspiciously like anticipation. "We start with basics," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from her. "Intelligence gathering isn't just about reading people. It's about understanding systems, recognizing disruption patterns, and knowing when someone's trying to manipulate the flow of information." He pulled up a network diagram showing Adrian's organization, a complex web of businesses, personnel, and connections that made Maris's head spin. "This is what we thought the structure looked like 3 days ago. After Garrett's betrayal, we know at least 30% of this is compromised." Maris studied the diagram, her analytical mind automatically seeking patterns. The shipping operations in the lower quadrant, they all report through the same 3 intermediaries. If Garrett corrupted one of them, he'd have access to multiple revenue streams without having to compromise the entire network. Marcus's eyebrow rose. "That's exactly what we suspected. How did you identify it so quickly?" "It's basic network theory. Any system with central nodes creates vulnerability points. If I wanted to corrupt this organization, I'd target the people who aggregate information before it reaches Adrian." Maris pointed to another cluster. "And these financial controllers, they're positioned to manipulate data without detection. Who audits them?" "Each other, theoretically. Which means if 2 of them collaborate, the third becomes the scapegoat." Maris felt the familiar thrill of problem solving, her psychology background merging with this new criminal education. "You need random external audits, not internal checks." Marcus made notes on his tablet, his expression thoughtful. "Adrian said you were sharp. He undersold it." They spent the next 3 hours dissecting the organization's structure, Maris identifying vulnerability points with increasing confidence. Her academic training in behavioral systems translated disturbingly well to criminal enterprise. The same principles of human behavior applied whether you were running a therapy practice or a smuggling operation. Enough theory, Marcus finally said. Time for practical application. Adrian has meetings today with 4 separate contacts. You'll observe all of them. Maris's pulse quickened. What am I looking for? Lies, obviously, but also fear, ambition, loyalty shifts. After Garrett, Adrian needs to know who's solid and who's waiting for the right moment to betray him. Marcus stood, gesturing for her to follow. First meeting is in 20 minutes. Wear something professional but unmemorable. You're his assistant today, not his companion. The shift in role felt significant. Last night she'd been decorative protection, a visible claim of ownership. Today she was functional, a tool rather than a trophy. Maris found she preferred it. She changed into tailored black pants and a charcoal blouse, pulling her hair into a severe bun that made her look older, more serious. When she emerged, Marcus nodded approval. Better. Remember, you're there to take notes and observe. Speak only if directly addressed, but watch everything. Adrian waited in his study, reviewing documents with the focused intensity Maris was learning to recognize as his working mode. He looked up as they entered, his gaze sweeping over her transformed appearance. Good, he said simply. Marcus briefed you on today's objectives? Identify loyalty shifts and deception patterns across 4 meetings. 5 now. I added another contact who's been suspiciously eager to meet since Garrett's incident. Adrian's expression hardened. People showing increased interest right after a betrayal tend to be either very concerned or very complicit. The first meeting took place in a private dining room at an exclusive club that made Henley's bar look like a fast food restaurant. The contact was a woman named Elaine Russo, mid-50s, elegant in the way that came from old money and older connections. She ran what appeared to be a legitimate art gallery, but actually served as a front for moving high-value items across international borders. Adrian, darling. Elaine air-kissed both his cheeks, her smile warm but her eyes calculating. I heard about the unpleasantness with Thomas. How absolutely dreadful. News travels fast, Adrian replied, his tone neutral. In our circles? Always. Elaine settled into her chair, her gaze flicking to Maris with brief interest before dismissing her as irrelevant. I wanted to reach out personally, assure you that my operations remain entirely uncompromised. If you need alternate routes while you restructure, I'm happy to accommodate. Maris watched Elaine's hands, perfectly manicured, resting calmly on the table. No fidgeting, no nervous energy. Either she was telling the truth or she was exceptionally skilled at deception. That's generous, Adrian said. What's the catch? Elaine laughed, the sound practiced. Always so suspicious. Can an old friend offer help without ulterior motives? No. Adrian's bluntness made Elaine's smile falter slightly. Everyone wants something. I prefer knowing what it is up front. A brief pause, then Elaine's expression shifted to something more genuine. Respect, maybe, or acknowledgement. Fine. I want first access to whatever new routes you establish once you've cleared out the rot. Thomas was an idiot, but his infrastructure was solid. When you take over his operations, I want preferential terms. There it was. Elaine wasn't offering help. She was positioning herself to profit from Garrett's downfall. Maris made a note, watching Adrian's face remain carefully neutral. That's premature. I haven't decided what to do with Garrett's operations yet. Of course you have. Elaine leaned forward. You're going to absorb the profitable pieces and burn the rest. I'm simply asking to be remembered when you're distributing the spoils. Maris observed the exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't friendship. It was transaction dressed in civility, each party maneuvering for advantage while maintaining the fiction of alliance. Adrian caught her eye briefly, a question in his gaze. She gave the smallest nod. Elaine was being truthful about her intentions, even if those intentions were purely self-serving. The meeting concluded with vague promises and careful non-commitments. Walking out, Adrian murmured, Your assessment? She's honest about being opportunistic, Maris replied quietly. Not compromised, just pragmatic. She'll work with whoever offers the best terms. Agreed, which makes her reliable in her unreliability. Adrian guided her toward the next meeting. Sometimes the mercenaries are safer than the believers. At least you know what drives them. The second contact was James Park, a logistics coordinator who managed warehouse operations across 3 states. He arrived nervous, his handshake clammy, his eyes darting around the room like he expected an ambush. "Mr. Calder, thank you for seeing me on short notice." James's voice cracked slightly. "I wanted to address any concerns about my division's security protocols personally." Maris didn't need psychology training to see his fear. The man was terrified. "What concerns would those be?" Adrian asked mildly. Well, after the Garrett situation, I thought you might be reviewing all operational security. I wanted to assure you that my facilities have been completely clean. No unauthorized access, no suspicious activities, everything by the book." Adrian studied him in silence, letting the pause stretch uncomfortably. Maris watched James's anxiety spike, pulse visible in his neck, sweat beginning to bead at his hairline. "James, do you know why people volunteer information before they're accused?" What?" "Guilt." Adrian's voice went cold. "Innocent people wait to be questioned. Guilty people try to control the narrative." James went pale. "I swear I haven't done anything wrong. I just thought, what have you heard about my operations being compromised?" Adrian interrupted. "Nothing specific, just rumors. People talk. I wanted to make sure you knew I wasn't involved in whatever Garrett was doing." Maris made notes, her mind cataloging James's responses. His fear seemed genuine, but so did his ignorance. He wasn't lying about being uninvolved. He was lying about something else. "Who have you talked to about Garrett?" Adrian asked. James hesitated. "Just my immediate supervisor, and maybe a couple of warehouse managers who were worried about job security." "Names?" "Stephen Torres, my supervisor, and managers Davis and Kowalski at the northern facilities." Adrian's expression didn't change, but Maris felt the temperature drop. "Torres reported directly to Garrett on 3 projects last quarter. Did you know that?" "No, I didn't. Stephen never mentioned—" James's panic was escalating. "Am I in trouble?" "Because I swear I don't know anything about what Garrett was planning." "You're not in trouble," Adrian said, though his tone suggested that could change rapidly. "But you will tell me exactly what Torres discussed with you regarding the Garrett situation. Every word." James complied, his story tumbling out in anxious fragments. Torres had been asking questions: what Adrian might do about Garrett's betrayal, whether operations would continue normally, if anyone else might be investigated. Standard worried employee concerns, except for one detail that made Maris's instincts flare. "He asked if you kept backup records," she interrupted. "Your warehouse manager. Why would he care about that?" James blinked. I don't know. He said it was about compliance, making sure we had documentation if there were audits." Adrian and Maris exchanged glances. Marcus had mentioned backup records earlier, internal documentation that could prove or disprove involvement in compromised operations. If Torres was asking about them, he was either covering tracks or trying to figure out what evidence might exist. "Thank you, James," Adrian said abruptly. "You've been very helpful. Return to your normal duties and don't discuss this meeting with anyone, especially not Torres." James practically fled, relief and residual fear warring across his features. Once he was gone, Adrian turned to Marcus, who'd been observing from the corner. "Put surveillance on Torres. I want to know everyone he contacts, every communication, every movement." "Already done," Marcus replied. "I flagged him when James mentioned Garrett's direct reports." Maris felt a small thrill at having identified something significant. Torres is either Garrett's partner or someone trying to figure out how much exposure he has. Either way, he's a problem. Adrian checked his watch. "Next meeting in 30 minutes. This one will be different." Different turned out to be an understatement. The third contact was Victor Molina himself, the man who'd ordered Maris's kidnapping. She felt her body go rigid at the sight of him entering Adrian's private office, flanked by his own security. "Adrian," Molina's voice carried false warmth, "I appreciate you agreeing to meet. These territorial disputes are so tiresome. Better to resolve them like civilized men." Adrian's hand found Maris's under the table, squeezing once, reassurance or warning, she couldn't tell. "You tried to kidnap my associate. That's not a territorial dispute. That's an act of war." A misunderstanding. Molina spread his hands. My people acted without full authorization. I've disciplined those responsible. Lie. Maris knew it instantly. Molina's expression held no contrition, no genuine concern. This was performance, testing to see if Adrian would accept the obvious fiction. Your people followed direct orders, Adrian said flatly. Don't insult my intelligence with denials. Molina's mask slipped slightly, irritation flashing across his features. Fine. I made a move. You blocked it. Can we move past that and discuss actual business? What business would that be? Garrett left significant infrastructure unmanaged. Routes, contacts, facilities. We could divide them. You take the eastern operations, I take the western. Maris watched the proposal land, saw Adrian's expression remain neutral while his mind clearly calculated angles. This was the real play. Molina had helped engineer Garrett's downfall, positioning himself to profit from the vacuum. You worked with Garrett, Maris said suddenly, the words escaping before she could stop them. Every head turned toward her. That's why you're so familiar with his infrastructure. You were partners. Molina's eyes went cold. Your assistant is very perceptive and very rude. She's right, though. Adrian's voice carried dangerous amusement. You and Garrett planned this together. He was supposed to remove me. You'd consolidate his operations with yours. Except something went wrong. He moved too early, got sloppy, and now you're trying to salvage what you can. That's an interesting theory, Molina said carefully. It's the truth. Maris couldn't stop now, her analytical mind piecing together patterns. You're here because you need Adrian to believe Garrett acted alone. If he knows you were involved, he'll come after your operations next. This meeting isn't about division, it's about survival. The silence that followed felt like pressure before an explosion. Molina's face had gone hard, his hands flat on the table. His security shifted position, hands moving toward concealed weapons. Marcus tensed, ready to intervene. You should teach your assistant to be quiet, Molina said softly. Smart women who talk too much tend to have short lives. Adrian was standing before Maris, registered the movement, his presence radiating controlled violence. Threaten her again, and there won't be enough of you left to identify. The two men stared at each other across 3 feet of space, predators assessing commitment. Finally, Molina raised his hands in mock surrender. No threats, just advice. But I think we're done here. He stood, his security flanking him. You want war, Adrian? Over some bartender you've known for a week? Think carefully about that choice. I don't need to think about it. Touch her, touch anyone connected to me, and I'll burn everything you've built to the ground. We clear? Molina's smile held no humor. Crystal. He left without another word, his security sweeping the room one last time before following. The door closed with a decisive click, leaving Maris shaking with adrenaline. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I shouldn't have spoken. I just saw the pattern and... You were magnificent. Adrian pulled her up, his hands on her shoulders, eyes blazing with something between pride and concern. Reckless and brilliant. You identified the real play before I did. But I threatened the negotiation. There was no negotiation. Molina came here to test my resolve and gather intelligence. You showed him exactly what he needed to know, that you're valuable to me and under my protection, which means he'll either back off or escalate. Adrian's jaw tightened. We need to be ready for either option. Marcus was already on his phone, issuing rapid instructions. Doubling security at all primary locations. I want eyes on Molina's operations 24/7. If he sneezes wrong, I want documentation. Maris sank into her chair, her hands trembling. She'd just confronted a crime boss who'd tried to have her kidnapped, exposed his conspiracy in front of witnesses, and forced Adrian into a position where backing down would show weakness. Her psychology professors would be horrified, or fascinated, possibly both. The last 2 meetings are postponed, Adrian decided. After that confrontation, we need to reassess security before proceeding. Smart, Marcus agreed. Give me 4 hours to shore up protocols. Adrian nodded, then turned to Maris. You need a break, and we need to talk about operational boundaries. They retreated to his study, the door closed against the controlled chaos of security preparations. Adrian poured whiskey despite the early hour, pressing a glass into Maris's hands. You can't do that again, he said without preamble. I know. I'm sorry. Let me finish. Adrian sat across from her, his expression serious. You can't expose strategic insights in front of hostile parties without giving me warning first. In this case, it worked because Molina was already committed to his play. But if you'd been wrong, or if he'd had time to adjust his approach, we could have lost critical advantage. Maris absorbed the criticism, recognizing its validity. You're right. I should have signaled you first, but your analysis was perfect. Molina and Garrett were absolutely working together, which means when we take down Molina's operation, we'll find evidence linking him to multiple betrayals. Adrian swirled his whiskey. You've just given us the roadmap for destroying one of my biggest competitors. The casual way he discussed destroying someone's criminal empire made Maris's head spin. This is insane. A week ago I was studying for exams and complaining about tips. Now I'm helping plan strategic takedowns of organized crime figures. You're also alive, which you wouldn't be if you'd stayed in your apartment pretending this world didn't exist. Adrian's voice softened. I know this isn't what you chose, but you're adapting better than anyone I've ever brought into this life. Maybe that says something disturbing about me. Or maybe it says you were always capable of more than pouring drinks and being invisible. Adrian leaned forward. You have a gift, Maris. The ability to see patterns, read people, understand systems most people never notice. In your world, that made you a good psychology student. In mine, it makes you dangerous. Dangerous to who? To people who rely on deception, to competitors who think they can manipulate situations, to anyone who underestimates you. Adrian's gaze held hers, including me sometimes. The admission surprised her. You're not afraid I'll betray you? Terrified. But I'm more afraid of what happens if I don't use every available resource to survive what's coming. Molina won't back down. He's committed now, and men like him don't accept defeat gracefully. Maris understood what he wasn't saying. She'd made herself a target by speaking up, by demonstrating value beyond decoration. Molina would see her as both leverage and threat, something to be acquired or eliminated. So what happens now? She asked. Now we go on offense. We've been reactive since Garrett's betrayal, trying to identify compromises and shore up defenses. But defense only works if your opponent eventually makes a mistake. Molina won't. He's too experienced. Then we force him into a mistake. Adrian smiled, the expression containing genuine warmth for the first time since she'd met him. Exactly. We feed him information that looks valuable, but leads him into a trap, and you're going to help me design it. They spent the next 2 hours constructing an intelligence operation that felt like playing chess with human lives. The goal was simple: make Molina believe Adrian's shipping operations were vulnerable during a specific window, encourage an attempted takeover, and document everything for both criminal elimination and legal prosecution. We can't just kill him, Adrian explained at Maris's questioning look. That starts wars, destabilizes territories, creates power vacuums that attract worse problems. Better to destroy him systematically, break his operations, turn his allies, expose him to authorities who'll cage him for decades. That's surprisingly civilized for organized crime. I didn't build this empire by being unnecessarily violent. Violence is expensive, attracts attention, and creates enemies. Strategic destruction is cleaner. Adrian pulled up files on his tablet. Molina has 3 primary revenue streams: protection rackets, trafficking, and smuggling. We're going to collapse all 3 simultaneously. Maris studied the operational breakdown, her mind automatically cataloging vulnerabilities. His protection rackets depend on fear. If we demonstrate he can't protect his own operations, his clients will stop paying. And his trafficking operations require corrupt officials who look the other way. If we expose those officials, the whole network collapses. Maris felt the pieces clicking together. But we need evidence. Hard documentation that connects Molina directly to illegal activities, which we'll get when he tries to take over my shipping routes. Adrian's expression turned predatory. We set up a fake vulnerability, wait for him to exploit it, and document everything: his people, his methods, his direct orders. Then we hand it all to the FBI with a bow. It was brilliant and brutal. Maris should have been horrified at her enthusiasm for destroying a human being's life work. Instead, she felt energized, her analytical mind already refining the strategy. We need to make the vulnerability believable, she said. Something that matches the intelligence he's already gathered. What does he think he knows about your operations? Adrian pulled up surveillance reports, counterintelligence assessments, data stolen from compromised contacts. Together, they built a profile of what Melina believed about Adrian's organization: strengths, weaknesses, patterns, vulnerabilities. He thinks you're overextended after Garrett's betrayal, Maris observed. Stretched thin, trying to secure too many operations simultaneously. If we reinforce that belief, he'll commit resources to striking where I appear weakest, which will actually be where I'm strongest. Adrian made notes. Marcus can position our best security as apparent vulnerability, make it look like skeleton crews, and reduce surveillance. They refined the plan over the next hour, each iteration becoming more sophisticated. Maris found herself contributing insights that came from her psychology background: how to manipulate Melina's cognitive biases, what information would bypass his skepticism, how to make the trap irresistible. "You're enjoying this?" Adrian said, not quite a question. Maris paused, examining her own reactions with the clinical detachment she'd learned in training. He was right. The intellectual challenge, the strategic complexity, the sense of wielding real power. It activated something in her that academic work never had. "Does that make me a terrible person?" she asked. "It makes you honest. Most people refuse to acknowledge they're capable of ruthlessness. You're at least examining it consciously." Adrian closed his tablet. "The question isn't whether you're capable of this work. It's whether you can live with being capable." Maris didn't have an answer. A week ago, her biggest moral dilemma had been whether to report a classmate for plagiarism. Now she was planning the systematic destruction of a criminal organization, using psychological manipulation to engineer someone's downfall. The person she'd been would have been horrified. The person she was becoming felt grimly satisfied. "We implement the plan starting tomorrow," Adrian decided. "Tonight, you rest. You've done enough for one day." But rest proved impossible. Maris's mind churned through scenarios, refining strategies, identifying potential failures. Around 8 p.m., Marcus knocked with dinner and a concerned expression. "You need to eat and sleep. This level of operational planning isn't sustainable without breaks." "I'm fine." "You're running on adrenaline and intellectual stimulation. Trust me, I've seen it before. It feels sustainable until you crash." Marcus set down the tray. "Eat. Then we're doing something that doesn't involve criminal strategy." "Like what?" "Like you're going to tell me about your actual life, the one before this, what you were studying, what you wanted to do, who you were planning to become." The request caught Maris off guard. In the chaos of the past week, her previous existence had faded to abstraction. School, career plans, normal ambitions, they seemed to belong to someone else. "I was getting my master's in psychology," she said slowly. "Clinical focus, specializing in trauma therapy. I wanted to work with survivors of violence, help people rebuild after crisis." Marcus absorbed this with an unreadable expression. "And now you're here helping plan violence instead of healing from it. I know how it looks. How does it look to you?" Maris considered the question seriously. "Like I'm using the same skills for different outcomes. Understanding trauma requires understanding how people break. Understanding how people break means understanding how to break them. The methodology isn't that different. That's a rationalization." "I know," Maris met his gaze. "But it's also true. I'm good at this, Marcus. Disturbingly good. And part of me has been waiting my entire life to find something I'm actually exceptional at, instead of just competent." Marcus sat back, studying her with the same analytical intensity she'd learned to recognize in Adrian. "You understand what you're risking? The person you were, the life you planned, the version of yourself that believed in rules and ethics, you're killing her, slowly, one compromise at a time. Or I'm discovering who I actually am instead of who I thought I should be." Maris pushed food around her plate. "Maybe the person I was before was the compromise. The safe version, the acceptable version. This might be more honest." "Honest doesn't mean healthy." "Neither does safe." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of truth settling between them. Finally, Marcus stood, collecting the barely touched dinner. "Get some sleep, Miss Carter. Tomorrow we start building the trap. And once we do, there's no going back. Make sure you're ready for that." After he left, Maris stood at the windows overlooking Chicago, the city lights spreading to the horizon like constellations. Somewhere down there, Molina was planning his next move. Garrett was calculating his survival. Other enemies she didn't even know about were watching, waiting, looking for weakness. And here she stood, 73 floors above it all, learning to be the kind of weapon they wouldn't see coming. Her phone buzzed. Adrian. Tomorrow we go hunting. Sleep well. Maris smiled despite everything, feeling the dark thrill of anticipation. She was becoming something dangerous, something she didn't fully understand yet. But for the first time in her life, she felt fully awake. She fell asleep planning strategies, her dreams filled with chess moves and power plays, the psychology student and the criminal strategist merging into something new, something sharper, something that belonged to Adrian Calder's world more than she'd ever belonged anywhere. The trap required 3 weeks to build properly. 3 weeks of careful intelligence leaks, strategic misinformation, and controlled vulnerability displays that made Adrian's shipping operations look exploitable without appearing suspiciously obvious. Maris participated in every stage, her psychology expertise proving invaluable in predicting how Molina would interpret each carefully planted piece of information. "He's too smart to believe we're actually weak," she explained during one planning session, surrounded by Marcus, Adrian, and 2 operational coordinators. "But he'll believe we're distracted, that our attention is divided between securing compromised assets and maintaining regular operations. Everyone makes mistakes when they're stretched thin." Adrian nodded, his expression thoughtful as he studied the deployment map spread across the conference table. "So we give him multiple apparent opportunities, each one plausible, forcing him to choose which vulnerability to exploit. And whichever he chooses, we're ready." Marcus marked positions on the map with red pins, each representing concealed security teams. The northern warehouse looks understaffed but has double coverage hidden in adjacent buildings. The southern route appears to have reduced surveillance, but every container carries GPS trackers and concealed cameras. Maris watched the strategy unfold with growing appreciation for its complexity. They weren't just setting one trap. They were creating an entire ecosystem of false vulnerabilities, any of which could catch Molina if he moved against them. The sophistication reminded her of behavioral experiments, manipulating variables to produce predictable outcomes. "What about Torres?" she asked. "Have we confirmed his involvement?" "Completely." Adrian pulled up surveillance footage showing James Park's supervisor meeting with known Molina associates. "He's been feeding information to Molina for at least 8 months, possibly longer. We're letting him continue for now. Controlled leak of false intelligence is better than shutting him down and alerting Molina that we know." The casual way they discussed using Torres as an unwitting double agent made Maris's head spin. These weren't abstract strategic principles anymore. They were real people being manipulated, their choices engineered, their futures determined by decisions made in this room. "You're thinking too much," Adrian said, catching her expression. "I can see it on your face." "I'm thinking about the ethics of what we're doing, using people without their knowledge. Torres chose to betray us for money. We're simply using his greed against him." Adrian's voice held no sympathy. "In this world, everyone makes choices. Some lead to power, some to prison, some to worse. Torres chose poorly. We're just accelerating the consequences." Marcus cleared his throat. "Molina is moving faster than projected. Our intelligence suggests he's planning something within the next 72 hours. The room went still. 72 hours meant the trap would spring ahead of schedule, with less preparation time than they'd planned. Adrian's jaw tightened, his mind visibly calculating adjusted timelines. "What triggered the acceleration?" Maris asked. "Unknown. Either he's getting pressure from his own organization to show results, or he's received intelligence suggesting our window of vulnerability is closing." Marcus pulled up communication intercepts. "His people have been unusually active the past 48 hours. Increased chatter, asset repositioning, financial movements that suggest imminent action." Adrian stood, pacing to the windows with the restless energy Maris had learned meant his mind was working through scenarios at high speed. If he moves in 72 hours, which target will he choose? Maris studied the map, applying everything she'd learned about Molina's psychology. He was ambitious but cautious, aggressive but calculating. Given limited time, he'd choose the target that offered maximum gain with acceptable risk. "The northern warehouse," she said with sudden certainty. "It's the highest value target with apparent vulnerability. The shipping manifests we leaked through Torres show valuable inventory arriving Thursday night. Melina would see it as worth the risk. I agree. Marcus was already adjusting positions on the map. We fortify northern operations, pull resources from the other targets to create genuine vulnerability elsewhere. No, Adrian's voice cut through the planning. We don't fortify. We make it even more attractive. The room went silent. Marcus stared at Adrian like he'd suggested setting himself on fire. Sir, that's strategic. Adrian turned from the window, his expression hard. Melina is moving fast because he suspects something. If we suddenly reinforce our most vulnerable position, we confirm his suspicions. But if we make it even more appealing, even more apparently exploitable, his greed will overcome his caution. Maris understood the logic even as her stomach twisted with anxiety. You're betting he won't be able to resist an opportunity that looks too good. I'm betting his timeline pressure will make him accept risks he'd normally avoid. Greed plus urgency equals mistakes. Adrian looked at Marcus. Can we secure the warehouse without visible reinforcement? It'll be tight. We'd need to position teams inside the shipment containers themselves, use the inventory as cover. Risk to personnel goes up significantly. Acceptable risk for this payoff. Adrian's tone left no room for argument. Make it happen. I want every moment documented. Video, audio, direct evidence of Melina's people committing federal crimes on camera. The meeting dissolved into logistics planning, teams coordinating movements with military precision. Maris watched Adrian command his organization, seeing clearly for the first time why people followed him despite the danger. He didn't ask anyone to take risks he wouldn't accept himself. He was willing to bet everything on strategic calculations that might fail catastrophically. It was terrifying and compelling in equal measure. Late that night, Maris found herself unable to sleep again, her mind churning through scenarios. She'd moved from the guest suite to a workspace Adrian had set up for her, a smaller office adjacent to his study, equipped with computers, analysis software, and direct access to intelligence feeds. The symbolic significance wasn't lost on her. She'd transitioned from protected asset to operational partner. You should rest. Adrian's voice came from the doorway, making her jump. Thursday will be demanding. I keep thinking about what could go wrong. Melina could suspect the trap. His people could be better armed than we anticipate. The documentation could fail. Maris turned from the screens displaying warehouse schematics. We're betting lives on psychological predictions. We are. Adrian entered the office, settling into the chair across from her desk. Your predictions, specifically. If you're wrong about Melina's target or timing, people could die. The weight of that responsibility sat heavy on Maris's chest. How do you live with this? Making decisions that determine whether people survive. Badly, mostly. Adrian's honesty surprised her. I don't sleep well. Haven't for years. Every choice creates ripples I can't fully control. But inaction also creates consequences, usually worse ones. So I make the best calculations I can and live with the outcomes. Maris studied him in the dim office lighting, seeing past the controlled exterior to the exhaustion underneath. Do you ever regret it? Building this empire, living this life. Every day. The admission came quiet, almost vulnerable. But regret doesn't change anything. I am who I am. This is what I built. The only choice is whether to defend it effectively or watch it collapse. You could walk away, leave this world, start over somewhere else. Adrian's laugh held no humor. People like me don't get to start over. Our past follows us, demanding payment. The only direction is forward, through whatever comes next. He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. But you're different. When this is finished, when Melina is neutralized and the organization is secure, you could still walk away. Return to your studies, your normal life. Forget this ever happened. Maris wanted to agree, to confirm that she was just passing through this world temporarily. But the words wouldn't come. 3 weeks ago, she might have believed escape was possible. Now, after planning strategic operations and wielding real power, after discovering capabilities she hadn't known she possessed, the idea of returning to lecture halls and case studies felt like trying to fit into clothes she'd outgrown. What if I don't want to forget? The question escaped before she could stop it. Adrian went very still. Then you need to understand what that means, not as an abstract concept, but as a concrete reality. This world doesn't have retirement plans. People who enter it either rise to positions of power or get crushed by those who do. There's no comfortable middle ground. What if I want to rise? The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither seemed ready to voice. Finally, Adrian stood, moving to the windows that had become his default thinking space. If you stay, you become a target, permanently. Every enemy I make becomes your enemy. Every risk I take affects your safety. The protection I can offer isn't absolute. You saw that with the kidnapping attempt. He turned to face her. And you'd have to accept that the work involves moral compromise. We're not heroes, Maris. We're survivors using whatever tools work. I know. Do you? Or are you still telling yourself this is temporary, that you're fundamentally different from people like me? Adrian's voice held challenge and something else. Hope, maybe, or fear. Because if you stay, you become one of us. That changes you permanently. There's no going back to the person you were. Maris stood, crossing to where he waited by the windows. The city sprawled below them, millions of lives intersecting in patterns too complex to fully comprehend. She'd been one of those invisible lives a month ago, struggling and striving and ultimately insignificant in the grand machinery of the world. Maybe I don't want to go back. Maybe that person was never who I was supposed to be, just who I thought I had to be to fit in. She met his gaze directly. You said I was dangerous to people who rely on deception. What if I want to be dangerous? What if that's more honest than pretending to be harmless? Adrian's expression shifted through emotions too quick to catalog. You understand what you're saying? I understand I'm good at this, better than I've ever been at anything. I understand I feel more alive planning strategic operations than I ever did studying theory. Maris's voice strengthened with conviction. I understand that you gave me a choice about staying until the threat passed. Now I'm making a different choice about who I want to become. For a long moment, Adrian said nothing. Then slowly, carefully, he reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses. This isn't gratitude or Stockholm Syndrome talking? You're choosing this freely? As freely as any choice gets made in your world. Maris allowed herself to lean into his touch. I see the costs. I understand the risks, and I'm choosing it anyway. Adrian kissed her then, and it was nothing like the claiming kiss in the bar that had started this entire cascade. This was question and answer, offer and acceptance, two people acknowledging something that had been building since she'd first agreed to stay. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. If we do this, I can't promise safety. I can't promise happy endings. All I can offer is partnership in surviving whatever comes. That's more honesty than most people get. Maris smiled despite the gravity. When do we stop pretending this is temporary? Right now. Adrian stepped back, his expression shifting to something more businesslike, even as warmth lingered in his eyes. Starting tomorrow, you're not just advising on operations, you're part of them. Full operational clearance, access to all intelligence, voice in strategic decisions. And the trap? You'll be on site, coordinating from the mobile command center. I want your eyes on everything as it unfolds. Adrian's jaw tightened. If something goes wrong, if Melina deviates from predictions, you'll be the first to recognize the pattern shift. The trust implicit in that statement made Maris's chest tight. Adrian was betting his organization's survival on her abilities, putting his people's lives in her hands. The responsibility should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like recognition, like finally being seen for what she actually was instead of what she appeared to be. Thursday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that seemed designed to mock the violence being planned. Maris dressed in tactical black, her hair pulled back severely, a communications earpiece fitted professionally by one of Marcus's team. She looked like someone who belonged in Adrian's world now. No trace of the struggling bartender remained. The mobile command center turned out to be a modified van parked 3 blocks from the northern warehouse, packed with surveillance equipment and direct feeds from concealed cameras throughout the facility. Marcus commanded the operation with quiet efficiency, coordinating 12 security teams positioned in and around the target. Melina's people are moving, one of the surveillance operators reported. 3 vehicles approaching from the south, 2 from the east, consistent with assault team deployment. Maris studied the screens showing multiple angles of the warehouse. The containers that had arrived yesterday sat in neat rows, each one actually containing armed security teams instead of the valuable electronics the manifest claimed. The loading dock appeared deserted, maintenance lighting providing just enough visibility to seem careless rather than calculated. "They're doing a perimeter check first," she observed, watching figures move through the exterior shadows. "Professional approach. Molina sent experienced people." "Good." Adrian's voice came through the comms from his position at the secondary command location. "We want this documented by professionals who know what they're doing. Makes the evidence more credible." The assault team spent 20 minutes probing security, testing locks, checking for guards. Finding nothing that raised immediate alarms, they finally committed, 6 figures moving through the poorly secured loading dock entrance with practiced ease. "Let them get to the containers," Marcus ordered quietly. "We need them actually attempting theft before we spring it." Maris watched the team spread through the warehouse, their communications intercepted and recorded by the sophisticated equipment surrounding her. They were discussing which containers to hit first, how much they could transport, what route would be safest for extraction. Every word documented, every face captured on high-definition video, evidence piling up in real time. "Something's wrong," Maris said suddenly, her instincts flaring. "They're too relaxed. This should feel like a high-risk operation, but they're acting like it's routine." Marcus's expression sharpened. "Explain." "Look at their body language. No tension, no heightened alertness. They're not behaving like people stealing from Adrian Calder." Maris's mind raced through implications. "They think they have permission, or protection, or—" "It's a test," Adrian's voice cut through, sharp with realization. "Molina sent them to confirm our vulnerability is real. The actual assault team is waiting for their report." Marcus swore viciously. "If we spring the trap on these scouts, the real team never shows. We lose our chance." Maris watched the screens, her strategic training warring with instinct. "But if we let them leave successfully, Molina knows the warehouse is vulnerable. He'll hit it with full force, and we might not have time to reposition for the real assault." "We need them to report partial success," Adrian decided. "They get enough to confirm vulnerability, but encounter enough resistance to make Molina commit everything to overwhelming it." "How?" Marcus demanded. Maris's mind clicked through scenarios, behavioral predictions flowing faster than conscious thought. Silent alarm. Make them think they triggered warehouse security accidentally. They flee with partial intelligence, report that the target is vulnerable but not completely undefended. Molina will interpret that as confirmation, send everything he has to overcome what he thinks is our actual security. "When does he move after receiving that report?" Adrian asked. "Tonight. Maybe tomorrow night at latest. He's already operating on an accelerated timeline. Partial success will make him aggressive, not cautious." Marcus was already issuing orders, security teams repositioning, modified plans flowing through the command structure. One of his operators triggered the silent alarm system, and the warehouse lights blazed to full illumination while pre-recorded announcements warned about security activation. On screen, the assault team reacted instantly, grabbing what they could carry and retreating toward their vehicles with urgent but controlled movements. Not panicked, just professionals responding to changing conditions. "Let them go," Marcus ordered, overriding the impulse to capture them. "We need Molina to get their report." The vehicles disappeared into Chicago's night traffic, carrying intelligence that was simultaneously accurate and completely misleading. Maris felt her heart hammering, the strategic gamble playing out exactly as she'd predicted, but still terrifying in its precision. "Well played," Adrian said, something like pride in his voice. "You read the situation perfectly." "We won't know that until Molina makes his move," Maris countered, but satisfaction warmed through her anxiety. She'd seen the pattern, made the call, and so far the predictions were holding. They didn't have to wait long. Intelligence reports started flowing in within hours. Molina was mobilizing everything, calling in personnel from outside operations, liquidating assets for immediate cash to fund what appeared to be a major assault. His communications, intercepted and decoded, revealed plans for a full warehouse takeover scheduled for the following evening. "He's committing everything," Marcus reported during the midnight briefing. 20-plus personnel, heavy weapons, extraction vehicles. "This isn't a smash and grab. He's planning to occupy the facility and strip it completely." Adrian studied the intelligence with cold focus. "Then we let him. Full documentation, complete evidence package. When we're done, the FBI will have everything they need to dismantle his entire organization. Mara spent the next 24 hours in a state of controlled tension, reviewing plans, checking contingencies, running scenarios until her eyes burned with fatigue. Adrian worked beside her, his presence simultaneously steadying and complicating. Their professional partnership now layered with personal connection, neither had time to properly explore. After tomorrow, Adrian said during a rare quiet moment, everything changes. Either we break Molina completely, or we're at war. There's no middle outcome. I know. Maris didn't look up from the deployment schedules she was reviewing. We've built a good trap. The variables are controlled as much as they can be. Variables in human behavior are never fully controlled. People surprise you. Adrian moved behind her, his hand settling on her shoulders, kneading the tension there. You surprise me constantly. A month ago you were bartending. Now you're coordinating a major law enforcement operation disguised as criminal activity. Your world moves fast. My world consumes people. The fact that you're not just surviving but thriving is remarkable. His hand stilled. After this is over, we should discuss what comes next. For us, for your role, for how this partnership works long term. Maris turned to face him, seeing vulnerability beneath his usual control. You're worried I'll change my mind. Decide this life isn't what I want after seeing the violence tomorrow might bring. It's possible. Intellectual strategy is different from witnessing actual consequences. I'm not naive, Adrian. I know what we're doing results in real harm to real people. I've made my peace with that. Maris stood, closing the distance between them. Or I'm lying to myself about having made peace with it. Either way, I'm committed to seeing this through. He kissed her then, fierce and possessive, the careful control slipping to reveal the intensity underneath. When they broke apart, his expression had shifted to something harder, more determined. Then let's finish this. Friday evening arrived with storm clouds building on the horizon, the weather matching the tension crackling through the command center. Every screen showed different angles of the warehouse, now genuinely understaffed to sell the vulnerability while hidden teams waited in containers and concealed positions throughout the facility. Molina's assault force arrived exactly on schedule, 3 times the size of the scout team, armed with weapons that made Marcus whistle low and impressed. They moved with military precision, overwhelming the skeleton security crew in minutes, securing the facility with brutal efficiency. Let them settle in, Adrian ordered, his voice calm despite the violence playing out on screen. We need them committed, confident they've won. Maris watched Molina's people spread through the warehouse, beginning the systematic looting of containers they believed held valuable electronics. The operation was professional, organized, everything they needed it to be for the evidence to hold up in court. Molina himself is here, one of the surveillance operators reported, highlighting a figure directing operations from a mobile command position. He's personally overseeing the theft. Perfect. The man himself on camera, directly participating in federal crimes, his face clearly visible and his orders being recorded. Everything they needed to destroy him was being documented in real time. How long do we wait? Marcus asked, his hand hovering over the signal to spring the trap. Maris studied the screens, watching patterns of movement, timing the operation's flow. Another 5 minutes. We want them deep in the containers when we move, harder to retreat, easier to surround. The minutes crawled past with agonizing slowness. Then finally, with Molina's entire force committed to loading stolen goods, Marcus gave the signal. The containers exploded with movement. Security teams emerged from hiding, surrounding the assault force with overwhelming numbers. External teams sealed exits, cutting off retreat. Lights blazed to full intensity while announcements blared through speakers, ordering everyone to drop their weapons. For one frozen moment, Maris thought it would work perfectly. Molina's people were caught, surrounded, outmaneuvered. Then someone opened fire, and the warehouse erupted into chaos. All teams engage, Marcus shouted, coordinating responses as gunfire echoed through the command center's speakers. Neutralize threats, but I want prisoners. Maris watched the screens, her training screaming that this was wrong, that violence at this scale wasn't supposed to happen. But Adrian had warned her. Plans involving human variables never went perfectly. People made choices. Fear overrode logic, and careful strategies collided with messy reality. The firefight lasted less than 3 minutes, but it felt eternal. When silence finally fell, 8 of Molina's people were in custody, 4 were wounded but alive, and 3 had escaped through a drainage system no one had properly secured. Molina himself was among the captured, his expensive suit torn, his expression hovering between rage and fear. "We have him," Marcus reported, satisfaction cutting through the tension. "Full documentation of the operation, multiple felony charges, direct evidence of interstate trafficking and theft. The FBI will have everything they need." Adrian's voice came through steady despite the violence that had just unfolded. "Casualties on our side. 2 injuries, neither critical. Everyone else clean." Maris felt something uncoil in her chest. Relief, maybe, or the beginning of processing what she'd just witnessed. Real violence, real consequences, people bleeding because of strategies she'd helped design. The theoretical had become brutally concrete. "You okay?" Adrian asked quietly through her private channel. "I will be." Maris's voice came steadier than she felt. "This is what I chose. I'm living with it." The FBI arrived within the hour, tipped off by anonymous calls that couldn't be traced back to Adrian's organization. They found Molina surrounded by evidence of federal crimes, his people in custody, and documentation that would fuel prosecutions for years. By morning, the news would report a major criminal operation disrupted, careers would advance on successful arrests, and Adrian's competitors would learn a brutal lesson about the cost of betrayal. Back at the penthouse hours later, Maris stood at the windows watching dawn break over Chicago. Adrian joined her, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand, both of them exhausted and wired in equal measure. "Molina will be in federal custody for decades," he said quietly. "His organization is destroyed, his assets seized, his people scattered. Garrett is already cooperating with authorities to reduce his own sentence. Torres is being arrested as we speak. We won everything we planned for." "We did." Adrian handed her a glass. "How does it feel?" Maris considered the question honestly. "Satisfying and disturbing. I helped destroy multiple people's lives tonight. The fact that they deserved it doesn't make it feel simple." "It's not supposed to feel simple. That's what separates us from people like Molina. We understand the cost of our choices." Adrian took a long drink. "But we make them anyway, because the alternative is worse." They stood in silence, watching the city wake to a Friday where one criminal empire had fallen and another had consolidated power. Maris knew she should feel triumphant, victorious. Instead, she felt transformed, like she'd crossed a threshold that couldn't be uncrossed. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild. Solidify our position, absorb the useful pieces of what Molina and Garrett left behind, strengthen security to prevent the next betrayal." Adrian turned to face her. "And you decide what role you want in that rebuilding." Maris met his gaze, seeing the question underneath the words. He was offering her a choice point: commit fully to this world or step back while she still could. The cautious part of her brain whispered that she should retreat, return to school, rebuild her normal life before she changed beyond recognition. But the honest part knew that ship had sailed weeks ago. "I want in, completely." The words came clear, decisive. "Not as your protected asset or your advisor, as your partner. Equal voice, equal risk, equal reward." Adrian's expression shifted through surprise to something warmer, more genuine than she'd seen from him. "You understand what that means? The danger, the moral complexity, the permanent transformation?" "I understand I'm already transformed. Might as well own it and build something powerful with it." Maris smiled despite the exhaustion. "Besides, you need me. Your intelligence network is still compromised, your organization needs restructuring, and you're terrible at reading people's unconscious tells." Harsh but accurate. Adrian pulled her close, his embrace fierce. "Equal partners, then. Starting with rebuilding everything Molina and Garrett damaged." "Starting with that," Maris agreed. "And then we make sure no one ever threatens what we're building again." They stood together as the sun rose higher, 2 people who'd found each other in chaos and chosen to build something from the wreckage. The city stretched before them, full of threats and opportunities, enemies and allies, challenges that would test everything they'd become. Maris Carter had been invisible once, pouring drinks and dreaming of a future that seemed safe and respectable. That person was gone now, replaced by someone harder, sharper, more dangerous. Someone who stood beside the most powerful man in Chicago, not as decoration, but as equal. She'd made her choice. Now she'd live with the consequences and build something worth the cost. The rebuilding began immediately, before the adrenaline from Melina's takedown had fully faded. Adrian's organization moved with the efficiency of a military operation, absorbing useful assets from the collapsed empire while systematically eliminating threats that remained. Maris found herself at the center of it all, her role evolving from observer to architect as she helped redesign the intelligence network from the ground up. "We're implementing a cell structure," she explained during a morning briefing with division heads, her confidence growing with each presentation. "Information flows vertically through trusted channels, not horizontally between departments. If one cell is compromised, it can't contaminate the others." The assembled managers, men and women who'd been running criminal operations since before Maris was born, listened with varying degrees of skepticism and respect. She'd proven herself during the Melina operation, but proving yourself once didn't guarantee continued acceptance in a world where loyalty was currency and trust was earned through blood. "With respect, Miss Carter," one of the senior logistics coordinators said carefully, "compartmentalization slows response times. If divisions can't communicate directly, we lose operational flexibility." "We lose vulnerability," Maris countered. The Garrett betrayal succeeded because he could corrupt multiple divisions simultaneously. Under the new structure, compromising one cell gives an enemy access to exactly one operational stream: limited damage, contained exposure. Adrian watched from his position at the head of the table, letting Maris handle the resistance without intervention. This was her test, whether she could command authority based on competence rather than proximity to power. "What about emergency situations?" another manager asked. "If we can't coordinate across divisions, how do we respond to immediate threats?" "Emergency protocols bypass the cell structure through encrypted channels that require dual authentication, both division head and central command approval." Maris pulled up the system architecture on the main display. Response time increases by approximately 90 seconds. Security improvement is measured in preventing catastrophic organizational collapse. The room fell silent as the managers processed the trade-off: 90 seconds of delay versus protection against total betrayal. Marcus nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "The math works," he said. "We've gotten sloppy, prioritizing speed over security. Recent events proved that was a mistake." Other heads began nodding, consensus building through the ranks. Maris felt a small thrill of victory. She'd won them over through logic and evidence, not intimidation or Adrian's authority. "Implementation begins immediately," Adrian said, his tone making it clear the discussion phase was over. "Miss Carter will coordinate the transition. You report to her on all security protocol updates." The managers filed out, several stopping to offer respectful nods to Maris that felt like hard-won recognition. When the room cleared, Adrian pulled her aside, his expression holding something between pride and concern. "You're becoming very good at this very quickly. That's both impressive and dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "People who rise too fast attract attention. Jealousy from those who feel bypassed, suspicion from those who question your loyalty, targeting from enemies who see you as a threat." Adrian's hand found the small of her back, the gesture now familiar and grounding. "You need to be careful. Not everyone in this organization is happy about your rapid ascent." Maris had suspected as much, her psychology training making her sensitive to the subtle hostilities beneath professional courtesy. "Who specifically should I watch?" "Daniel Cross, the financial controller. He expected to be promoted to strategic operations after we cleaned house. Instead, you're filling that role." Adrian pulled up personnel files on his tablet. "He's competent and loyal, but ambitious. That combination makes people unpredictable when they feel overlooked." "I'll be careful." "Be more than careful. Be aware. Cross won't move against you overtly, he's too smart for that. But he'll undermine you subtly, feed doubts to other managers, position himself as the more experienced alternative." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I'm telling you this because you need to understand. My protection only extends so far. You have to earn your position independently or it won't hold." The warning landed with appropriate weight. Maris had been operating under the assumption that Adrian's support made her untouchable. But in a world where power was constantly tested and hierarchies remained fluid, nothing was guaranteed beyond what you could personally defend. "Then I'll make myself indispensable, she said simply. Not through you, through results. Adrian smiled, the expression holding genuine warmth. You already are. The cell structure redesign is brilliant. If you can implement it without fracturing operational effectiveness, you'll have proven your value beyond question. The implementation took 3 intense weeks. Maris worked 18-hour days coordinating with division heads, restructuring communication protocols, building fail-safes into every system. Marcus proved invaluable, his security expertise filling gaps in her knowledge, while his support lent her credibility with skeptical personnel. You're running yourself into the ground, he observed one night, finding her still at her desk at 2 a.m. This pace isn't sustainable. It is until the system is operational. Maris rubbed her eyes, fatigue making her vision blur. After that, I can delegate maintenance, but the initial build requires my direct oversight. Marcus sat across from her, his expression paternal despite being only 15 years her senior. You're proving something, to the organization, to Adrian, to yourself. I recognize the pattern. I did the same thing when I first joined. And I burned out spectacularly, made mistakes that cost lives, and had to rebuild my reputation from scratch. Marcus leaned forward. You're more valuable to this organization healthy and sustainable than brilliant and collapsing. Pace yourself. I can't afford to pace myself. Every day the new system isn't operational is another day we're vulnerable. Maris returned to her screens, highlighting weak points in the communication architecture. Besides, I'm fine. Just tired. Famous last words. Marcus stood, heading toward the door. I'm ordering you to take tomorrow off. Sleep. Eat something that isn't coffee and anxiety. Remember, you're human. That's not a suggestion. Maris wanted to argue, but Marcus's tone left no room for negotiation. She nodded reluctantly, already planning to work from the penthouse instead of the office, maintaining productivity while technically complying. But when tomorrow arrived, Adrian had other plans. We're going out, he announced over breakfast. Already dressed in casual clothes Maris had never seen him wear. No arguments, no work, just a few hours of being normal people doing normal things. I have system integration tests scheduled. Marcus is handling them. He's perfectly competent. Adrian pulled her to her feet despite her protests. You've been operating at crisis pace for a month. You need a break before you make a mistake that undermines everything you've built. Maris wanted to argue, but exhaustion made her resistance crumble. Fine. A few hours. But if anything urgent develops, then Marcus will handle it and will return if absolutely necessary. Adrian guided her toward the elevator. Trust your team, Maris. That's part of effective leadership. They ended up at the Art Institute, of all places. Adrian moved through the galleries with surprising knowledge, discussing pieces with genuine appreciation rather than the acquisitive interest most wealthy collectors displayed. Maris found herself relaxing despite her intentions, the quiet beauty of the space creating distance from the constant pressure of the past weeks. I didn't expect you to be an art enthusiast, she admitted, studying a Monet that probably cost more than a small country. My mother was a painter, not particularly successful, but passionate. Adrian's expression softened with memory. She used to bring me here as a child, teach me to see what artists were really communicating beneath the surface. It was the first personal detail about his past Adrian had volunteered. Maris found herself hungry for more, wanting to understand the path that had led from art-loving child to criminal empire builder. What happened to her? Cancer, when I was 17. She left me enough money for college and a letter explaining that I should use my ability to read people for something meaningful. Adrian's voice carried old grief, carefully managed but still present. I'm not sure this is what she had in mind. You build structure in chaos, protect people who work for you, create order from criminal disorder. Maris touched his arm gently. Maybe that's meaningful in ways she'd understand. Adrian looked at her with something raw and unguarded. You have a gift for finding redemption in morally questionable choices. Or I'm just very good at rationalization. Maris smiled despite the weight of truth. Either way, we're here now. Might as well make it count for something. They spent 3 hours wandering galleries, discussing art and philosophy, and everything except criminal enterprise. For a brief window, they were just two people connecting over shared interests, the complexity of their situation fading into background noise. But reality reasserted itself the moment they returned to the penthouse. Marcus waited with an expression that made Maris's relaxation evaporate instantly. "We have a problem." Daniel Cross attempted to access the new security protocols using his old administrator credentials. When the system denied him, he tried to override the lockouts. Adrian went very still, the casual warmth disappearing behind professional calculation. Did he succeed? No. Maris's architecture held, but he made 3 separate attempts before our systems flagged the intrusion. Marcus pulled up security logs. He's claiming it was a misunderstanding, that he was just trying to verify system integrity. That's a lie. Maris studied the attempt patterns, seeing clear evidence of deliberate breach effort. Those weren't verification tests. He was trying to map the new communication channels, identify points of vulnerability. Why? Adrian's voice had gone cold. What does he gain from compromising the security system? Maris's mind raced through possibilities, behavioral patterns clicking into place. He's building leverage. If he can prove the new system has exploitable weaknesses, he undermines my credibility and positions himself as the security expert who identified the flaw. Or he's working with someone outside the organization who wants access to our operations. Marcus's expression darkened. We assumed cleaning out Molina and Garrett's people eliminated all the traitors. What if we missed someone? The possibility sent ice through Maris's veins. They'd been so focused on external threats that internal ones might have gone undetected. Cross had been with the organization for 8 years, long before Maris arrived, with deep connections throughout the power structure. "We need to isolate him," she said, her strategic mind immediately shifting to threat containment. "Restrict his access, monitor his communications, identify his contacts both internal and external." Agreed. Adrian was already issuing orders through his phone. "Marcus, put Cross under surveillance. I want to know everyone he talks to, every system he tries to access, every move he makes." "What about confronting him directly?" Maris asked. "If we accuse him openly, he'll either fold or get desperate. Either outcome creates problems." Adrian shook his head. "Better to watch him. Let him think he's undiscovered. See who he reaches out to. His contacts will reveal the larger conspiracy if one exists." It was textbook counterintelligence, the kind of strategy Maris had helped design but never implemented with someone she'd worked beside. Cross had sat in her briefings, offered technical input on the new systems, smiled and nodded while apparently planning sabotage. The betrayal stung more than she'd expected. Over the next week, surveillance revealed a disturbing pattern. Cross wasn't working alone. He had 3 other financial controllers in his network, all strategically positioned to monitor cash flows and manipulate records. Together, they'd been skimming approximately 2% of revenues for 18 months, enough to accumulate serious wealth, but not enough to trigger automated fraud detection. "It's sophisticated," Marcus admitted during the emergency briefing. "They structured the skimming to look like acceptable variance, distributed it across enough accounts to avoid pattern recognition. If Cross hadn't panicked about losing access after the security restructure, we might never have caught them." "How much have they stolen?" Adrian's voice remained calm, but Maris could see the fury beneath his control. "Approximately $4 million over 18 months. Marcus pulled up financial records showing the intricate theft architecture. They were planning to continue indefinitely, building retirement funds while the organization subsidized their theft. Maris studied the evidence, her analytical mind cataloging the psychological profile. They weren't planning to betray you to competitors. This was pure greed, steady theft with minimal risk. Cross only tried to access the new security protocols because he was afraid his skimming routes would be exposed during the restructure. "Does that make it better or worse?" Adrian asked. "Worse. Molina and Garrett were enemies making strategic moves. These people were trusted personnel stealing from their own organization." Maris felt anger building, hot and righteous. "They put everyone at risk for personal profit. How do you want to handle this?" Marcus looked at Adrian, the question carrying weight beyond its simple phrasing. Maris knew what he was really asking. How violent would the consequences be? In the criminal world, financial betrayal often ended in permanent solutions that didn't involve courts or prisons. Adrian was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, "We retrieve the money, document the theft comprehensively, and turn them over to federal authorities for prosecution." Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Sir, that's..." Strategic. Adrian's tone hardened.
Cost strategies.
Killing them creates martyrs, spreads fear through the organization, attracts law enforcement attention. But public prosecution for embezzlement sends a different message. Betray us and face consequences that destroy your entire life without making you a cautionary tale. Maris felt something release in her chest. She'd been prepared for Adrian to order something harsher, and part of her had been dreading what her reaction would be. But this approach balanced justice with pragmatism in a way she could live with. Plus, it strengthens our cooperation with the FBI, she added, seeing the larger strategy. We've already given them Melina and Garrett. Adding financial criminals makes us look like we're cleaning house, actively working against corruption. That buys us operational freedom elsewhere. Exactly. Adrian looked at Marcus. Make it happen. I want them in federal custody by end of week with evidence packages that guarantee conviction. The operation proceeded with clinical efficiency. Cross and his co-conspirators were arrested during simultaneous raids, evidence presented so comprehensively that their lawyers immediately began negotiating plea deals. The organization watched the spectacle with mixed reactions, some satisfied that justice was served, others unnerved by how thoroughly their colleagues were being destroyed through legal channels, rather than traditional methods. Maris found herself at the center of the narrative. She'd designed the security system that exposed the theft, identified the behavioral patterns that revealed the conspiracy, and recommended the prosecution approach that turned criminals into cautionary examples. Her reputation within the organization shifted dramatically, from Adrian's untested partner to the strategist who'd successfully cleaned house twice. People are calling you the architect, Marcus told her one morning, his tone carrying approval. The one who builds systems that catch what everyone else misses. That's dramatic. It's accurate. You've restructured our entire security framework in 6 weeks and exposed 2 major conspiracies in the process. Marcus smiled. Whether you like it or not, you're becoming a legend in certain circles. The attention made Maris uncomfortable, but she recognized its value. Reputation was power in Adrian's world, and the reputation she was building opened doors that would otherwise remain closed. Division heads sought her input on operations. External contacts requested meetings to assess the woman who'd helped topple Melina. Even competitors sent careful overtures, testing whether she might be recruited away from Adrian's organization. You could leave, Adrian said one night, the two of them alone in his study. Start your own operation, build your own empire. Several people have already made offers. Maris looked up from the security report she'd been reviewing. Are you trying to get rid of me? I'm acknowledging that you've proven yourself capable of independence. You don't need my protection or my organization anymore. You could stand alone if you chose. Adrian's expression was carefully neutral, but she heard the question underneath, would she choose to stay? I could, Maris agreed, but I don't want to. We work well together. Your instincts for power dynamics combined with my pattern recognition create something more effective than either of us alone. Partnership. Actual partnership. Not you protecting me or me advising you, but genuine collaboration. Maris stood, crossing to where he sat by the windows. Unless you're having second thoughts about equal partnership? Never. Adrian pulled her into his lap, his arms circling her waist. But I needed to know you were staying by choice, not because you felt obligated or dependent. I'm staying because I want to build something that matters, and because somewhere in the past 6 weeks, this stopped being your world I was visiting and became our world we're creating together. Adrian kissed her, the gesture carrying gratitude and possession in equal measure. When they broke apart, his expression had shifted to something more serious. There's one more piece of unfinished business, your education. Maris had almost forgotten about her abandoned psychology degree, the academic life that seemed to belong to a different person entirely. What about it? You're 3 courses short of your master's. I've arranged for you to complete them remotely through Northwestern's executive program. Your thesis can focus on organizational behavior and strategic decision-making, research you're essentially conducting anyway. The thoughtfulness of the gesture made Maris's throat tight. You want me to finish my degree? I want you to have options, to never feel trapped by this life because you sacrificed your credentials for it. Adrian's hand cupped her face gently. You chose this world freely. I want to ensure you could choose differently if you ever wanted to. Maris understood what he was really saying, that despite everything, despite the transformation and the violence and the moral compromises, he was trying to preserve some piece of her original self. The gesture felt like love, though neither of them had used that word yet. "Thank you," she said simply, meaning it more than words could convey. The next 3 months passed in a blur of activity. Maris completed her coursework while simultaneously restructuring Adrian's organization, her thesis evolving into a comprehensive analysis of decision-making in high-stakes environments. Her professors praised the work's sophisticated understanding of behavioral systems, never suspecting that her research subjects were criminals and her laboratory was organized crime. The security architecture she'd designed proved its worth repeatedly, catching 3 more attempted infiltrations and preventing 2 potential betrayals before they could develop. The organization stabilized under the new structure, profitable and secure in ways it hadn't been for years. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the nature of their enterprise began shifting. Adrian started refusing contracts that involved human trafficking or severe violence, focusing instead on operations that existed in genuine gray areas: information brokering, security consulting, logistics services that were legally questionable but not morally indefensible. "You're reforming me," he said one evening, reviewing a contract proposal they jointly decided to decline. "I'm influencing you towards sustainability," Maris corrected. "The purely criminal approach has limited lifespan. Either authorities shut you down or competitors kill you. But a hybrid model, legitimate businesses providing cover for selective gray market operations, that's defensible long-term." "When did you become a criminal strategist?" "The moment I decided to stay." Maris smiled, no longer troubled by the admission. "I'm just applying it systematically now." By month 6, the transformation was undeniable. Adrian's organization had evolved into something resembling a legitimate consulting firm with carefully hidden criminal elements, rather than a criminal enterprise with business fronts. Revenues actually increased as they shed high-risk operations in favor of sustainable ventures. Maris found herself designing something unprecedented, a criminal organization that could potentially transition to complete legitimacy over time, using accumulated power and resources to build conventional businesses that didn't require legal compromise. "It'll take years," she explained during a strategic planning session. "Maybe decades. But if we systematically replace illegal revenue streams with legal ones while maintaining the organizational structure and relationships, we could eventually operate entirely within the law." The division heads received this proposal with varying reactions. Some saw it as betrayal of what they'd built. Others recognized it as evolution toward survival. Marcus, surprisingly, became one of its strongest advocates. "I've been doing this for 20 years, he said during the debate. "I'm tired. I want to retire someday without looking over my shoulder, worried that old enemies will find me. A legitimate exit strategy, that's worth building toward." Adrian remained silent through the discussion, letting his people voice concerns and support freely. Finally, as consensus began forming, he spoke. "We implement a hybrid approach, maintain current gray operations that are profitable and relatively low risk, simultaneously build legitimate businesses in complementary sectors. Over 10 years, we shift the revenue balance until legal income exceeds illegal by a factor of 3 to 1. Then we make choices about final transition based on conditions at that time." It was a masterful compromise, acknowledging the long-term vision while not forcing immediate transformation. The organization accepted it, seeing a future that didn't inevitably end in prison or death. "You just changed the fundamental nature of organized crime in Chicago," Maris said afterward, impressed despite herself. "We changed it," Adrian corrected. "This was your vision. I just made it operational." That night, alone in the penthouse that had become home, Maris stood at the windows overlooking the city and took stock of everything that had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been invisible, struggling, unremarkable. Now she stood as equal partner in a criminal empire, architect of its security, designer of its future transformation. She'd gained power, purpose, partnership with someone who saw her completely. But she'd also lost the person she'd been, the idealistic psychology student who believed in simple morality and clear ethical lines. That person was dead, replaced by someone more capable and more compromised. "Regrets?" Adrian asked, joining her at the window. Maris considered the question honestly. "Some. I'll never know who I might have become if you hadn't kissed me in that bar. The conventional life I might have built. Would you choose differently if you could go back? No. The answer came without hesitation. That life would have been safe and small. This life is dangerous and significant. I choose significance. Adrian pulled her close, and they stood together watching Chicago's lights, two people who'd found each other through violence and built something extraordinary from the wreckage. 3 months later, Maris defended her thesis to a committee that praised her sophisticated analysis of behavioral systems in high-pressure environments. She graduated with her master's degree, the accomplishment feeling both trivial and essential, proof that she could operate in both worlds, straddling the line between legitimate achievement and criminal innovation. Sarah attended the graduation, their first in-person meeting since Maris had disappeared into Adrian's world. Her former roommate studied her with undisguised concern. "You look different," Sarah said carefully. "Harder. Like you've seen things that changed you." "I have." While Maris didn't elaborate, the gulf between their experiences too wide to bridge with casual explanation. "Are you happy?" The question surprised Maris into honesty. "I'm powerful. I'm purposeful. I'm building something that matters. Happy is complicated, but those things might be better." Sarah absorbed this, her psychology training clearly cataloging warning signs. If you ever need help, if you ever want out of whatever situation you're in, I know, thank you. Maris hugged her, the gesture carrying goodbye to more than just a friendship. But I'm exactly where I choose to be. Walking away from Sarah felt like closing a door on her previous life, accepting that there was no going back to who she'd been. But looking ahead to where Adrian waited, to the empire they were building together, Maris felt no regret. That evening, Adrian presented her with a gift, a corner office in the organization's headquarters, official title of Chief Strategic Officer, and complete operational authority over security and intelligence divisions. "You've earned this," he said simply, "not because of our personal relationship, but because you've proven yourself the most effective strategist in the organization." Maris looked around the office, seeing the culmination of 6 months of transformation. She'd gone from invisible bartender to criminal executive, from powerless to powerful, from overlooked to essential. "There's one more thing," Adrian added, pulling out a document. "I'm establishing a foundation, the Carter Foundation for Crisis Intervention. It'll provide resources for survivors of violence, fund trauma therapy programs, support people rebuilding after crisis. You'll run it." Maris stared at the incorporation papers, seeing her psychology training repurposed in a way that honored who she'd been while acknowledging who she'd become. "This is a way to use what we've built for something genuinely good. The foundation will be funded by our legitimate businesses, completely clean money, actually helping people." Adrian's expression held something vulnerable. "You said you wanted to work with survivors of violence. This lets you do that while maintaining your role here." The gift was perfect, acknowledging her desire to help people while not requiring her to abandon the power and purpose she'd found in his world. Maris felt tears prickling, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she whispered. "This is everything I didn't know I needed." Adrian kissed her, and in that moment, Maris understood that this was love. Not the simple, uncomplicated kind from romantic stories, but something deeper and more complex. Love that saw you completely, darkness and light, and built a future that honored both. The foundation launched 2 months later to genuine acclaim, its work helping hundreds of people navigate trauma and rebuild lives. Maris split her time between criminal strategy and legitimate social work, using her psychology expertise to design programs that actually worked while her organizational skills ensured effective implementation. "You're rehabilitating your own conscience," Marcus observed one day, watching her review foundation grant applications. "I'm proving you can be multiple things simultaneously," Maris corrected. "Criminal strategist and trauma counselor, partner to someone who operates outside the law while funding programs that help people follow it. Human beings are complex. Why shouldn't our lives reflect that?" It was rationalization, yes, but it was also truth. The world wasn't simple, morality wasn't binary, and people contained multitudes. Maris had learned to embrace that complexity instead of fighting it. A year after the kiss that changed everything, Maris stood in the conference room where she'd first presented her security redesign. The organization had grown more stable, more profitable, more legitimate than it had been in decades. Melina was serving 3 consecutive life sentences. Garrett had disappeared into witness protection. The corrupt officials who'd enabled them were facing their own prosecutions. And Maris Carter, once invisible and overlooked, now commanded respect throughout Chicago's criminal and legitimate business communities. The architect, they called her. The woman who could see patterns no one else noticed, build systems that actually worked, and navigate between worlds with equal competence. Adrian joined her at the window, his presence as familiar now as her own heartbeat. "Any regrets?" he asked, echoing their conversation from months before. Maris thought about the bartender she'd been, the psychology student with conventional dreams, the person who'd believed the world operated on simple rules. That person was gone, transformed beyond recognition. "None," she said honestly. "You gave me power, purpose, and partnership. You saw who I could become and helped me get there. Why would I regret that? Because it cost you the person you were. That person was never going to be extraordinary. She was going to be safe, comfortable, unremarkable." Maris turned to face him. "I choose this. Every day, with full awareness of the costs and compromises. I choose you, this life, this version of myself." Adrian smiled, the expression carrying everything words couldn't capture. "Then let's keep building. There's still work to do." And there was. The transition toward legitimacy continued. The foundation expanded its reach. The organization evolved into something that could potentially survive in either the criminal or legitimate world. Maris designed it all, her strategic mind finding solutions no one else saw, her psychological training applied to problems that would have seemed impossible a year ago. She'd stopped being invisible the moment Adrian called or kissed her in a crowded bar, but she'd become truly powerful the moment she chose to stay, to transform, to build something extraordinary from the chaos of that first violent night. Maris Carter had found her place in the world, not in conventional success or simple morality, but in the complex space between light and dark where real power lived. And she'd built it not by compromising who she was, but by discovering who she'd always been capable of becoming. The bartender was gone. The psychology student had graduated into something far more significant. What remained was the architect, powerful, purposeful, and exactly where she chose to be. Standing beside Adrian as they planned the future, Maris felt complete in a way she never had before. This was her empire now, as much as his. These were her choices, her consequences, her deliberately constructed life. And she'd never been more herself than in this moment, transformed and powerful, and finally, beautifully visible. The city stretched before them, full of challenges and opportunities, threats and potential. Together, they'd face it all, partners in every sense, building something that honored both their darkness and their desire to create meaning from the chaos. It wasn't the life Maris had planned. It was infinitely better.